Chapter 1521. Rong Yuishinlin was speechless. He sat down on the chair next to him. Dizun, can we stop for a few years and stop tormenting each other? Xiao Xian has been with you for a long time, and my heart has been tormented by both of you. My hair has also turned white. He looked at Ning Xiuma, who was sitting on the bed like a wooden person. He raised his hand and rubbed his eyebrows. Miss Ning, I hope you can live a good life with Dizun after you wake up. He's been tormented by you until he doesn't look like a god anymore. Sigh. I really miss Dizun playing chess with others leisurely. He sighed for a while and looked at Ning Xiuma again. She sat there motionless. Her little clothes were wrinkled by her grip, but she had no intention of letting go. It was as if it was the only thing she could rely on to breathe. Rong Yuishinlin felt sorry for the once lively girl who had become so dull. He sighed again and shook his head. Looking at you, you must have suffered a big blow. It's quite pitiful to see you like this. Sigh. I really don't know who's the one whose tribulation a friend's wife should not be teased, not to mention the supreme god's woman. Therefore, Rong Yuishinlin still avoided arousing suspicion. Ning Xiuma was like a piece of wood. She would take root wherever she was placed. She would not run away or make a fuss. She was more obedient than a sleeping baby. Rong Yuishinlin was naturally not afraid of her causing any trouble. He also did not want to stay in a room with her alone. After thinking for a while, he walked out. After walking out, he was still worried. He covered the room with a few layers of enchantments. After confirming that the pangolin could not find a gap, he turned around and left. Dizun must have used up a lot of telekinesis to revive the child this time. He was afraid that he would be so weak that he could not even stand when he returned. He had to prepare some pills to restore his telekinesis. He knocked his head with his fan miserably. Rong Yuishinlin, how many pills did you put in when you wanted to get him back on the bed? Ancestor, you're lucky to have a friend like me. You must have cultivated your fortune for 8 lifetimes. Dizun was not old or dead. He only slept and did not reincarnate. He only lived this life. Did he have 8 lives? Just as Rong Yuetian was grumbling wildly in her heart, a faint red light flashed in the distance, and the air made an explosive sound. The veins on Rong Yuishinlin's forehead throbbed. Damn it, that Shuilan is actually an expert in breaking formations. He was about to break out of the formation. It didn't matter. He would set up a few more traps for him so that he wouldn't come out and bother him again. Rong Yuetianlan moved forward with her fan. Shuilan simply hated that guy and blew to the bone. He only wanted to know about Momo's recent situation, not to kill or burn. That bastard actually trapped him in a bewitching array without saying anything. Fortunately, his ability to break through arrays had improved over the years. So after running left and right for 6 to 8 hours, he finally found the core of the array. He sneered and used all his strength to strike at the core of the array. With a loud clap of thunder, the surrounding fog finally dispersed. He finally saw the real trees and houses of Carefree Island. At the same time, he also saw Rong Yuishinlin standing not too far away, waving her fan. Shuilan threw himself at her. Flirty-lan, before Shuilan arrived in front of her, Rong Yuishinlin waved her fan again. In front of Shuilan, a peach blossom forest suddenly appeared. The peach blossom forest was filled with blooming flowers and butterflies. The scenery was beautiful. Chapter 1522. He abruptly turned his head, and only then did he realize that in front of him, behind him, to his left and to his right, there were also thick peach trees. It was obvious that he had fallen into the peach blossom array. Shuilan was furious. Everyone said that Dr. Fairy Rong Yu Tianlan's medical skills were brilliant, but he didn't expect his array skills to be so brilliant as well. He didn't know where his lousy fan came from, but he could create an array with just a wave of his fan. Shui Ilan was trapped in the array, and he even had the thought of tearing down the island. Flirtatious Lan, if you have the ability, trap me forever. Otherwise, once I break your array, I will immediately tear down your island and throw you into the sea to feed the turtles. He took a deep breath and began to look for a way to break the array. Outside the array, Rong Yu Tianlan stood there for a moment and tapped his palm with his fan. He frowned and thought, Flirtatious Lan? This red-clothed bastard actually gave him such a nickname as soon as they met. Was he flirtatious? He wasn't flirtatious, was he? At most, he was a little unruly. A demon was a demon, so ignorant. He looked at the fan in his hand. This fan was his treasure, called the Heaven and Earth fan. It could be flirtatious when waving it, and it was an excellent weapon in a fight. When necessary, it could even set up an array in time to trap the ghosts and monsters who came looking for trouble. He looked up at the sky and sighed softly. The D-Zune was probably casting a spell on Tianshu Mountain now, right? Hopefully, he could succeed in one try. Tianshu Mountain's 6th summit, the rocks were still there, and the broken trees were still lying on the ground. However, the branches and leaves were already dry. The ground was covered with grass. If one looked carefully, they could still see the dried blood stains between the branches and leaves. Shunjuli stood on the hillside and looked at everything in front of him. His fingertips and his sleeves were cold. Everything that happened that day seemed to be in front of him. Ning Shumal, who had just miscarried, was sent flying by his white light and hit the big tree over there. The tree was still standing there, unshakable. Shunjuli walked to the tree and touched it. He looked there, as if he could still see the scene of her lying beside the tree and then struggling to get up. Shuema. He felt as if there was a knife twisting in his heart. He was ruthless to the woman who loved him wholeheartedly and was pregnant with his baby. He saved the woman who killed his baby. If I could turn back time, it was a pity that time could not be reversed no matter what. What happened was what happened, and he could no longer reverse the damage of that day. His fingers were pressed convulsively against the tree, and his face was pale. Returning to this place, it was as if everything had happened yesterday. He saw the big rock that Ning Shuema had sat on. There, she carefully protected her belly, desperately trying to keep the child, until blood flowed out, until she was at her most desperate moment. He slowly walked over. His chest was hurting badly, and his blood was rushing up again. 1,000 regrets couldn't buy a second chance. He took a deep breath and steadied his mind. He was here to give birth to a child, not to regret his actions. He had to bring the child back to life so that he could make up for the damage he had done to her. He had never known about that child, and by the time he found out, it was already too late. That child was his and Shuema's first child. He had never doted on it, and it was gone just like that. How could he be willing to accept it? He sat on the big rock. Many of the bloodstains on the rock had turned dark brown. That day, he also saw the blood on the rock and thought it was Luzine's. He didn't know that it was from Ning Shuema's miscarriage. Chapter 1523. When he saw the blood on it that day, he thought it was Luzine's blood. How could he have known that it was from Ning Shuema's miscarriage? Now that he saw it, it was unusually glaring. It made his heart tighten again. He took a light breath again and threw all the distracting thoughts out of his mind. What he had to do next required him to be calm and focused. He couldn't have any distracting thoughts. Only then could he have a chance of success. After all, the child was only 4 months old. It hadn't really taken shape yet, and its soul was incomplete. It didn't even have the ability to become a baby spirit. If this child had a miscarriage, it wouldn't be difficult to summon its soul. Shunjili could do it easily. However, if he wanted to revive the child, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. This was because he had to repair its soul. After the repair was complete, he had to reconstruct its flesh and blood. The flesh and blood of a baby came from the blood of its father and mother. According to myths and legends, Neza once used his bones to return his father and flesh to return his mother. If Shunjuli wanted the child to come back intact, he had to make a main bone in his body and let the child attach to it first. Then he would talk about other things. This kind of technique was the most heaven-defying. It could be said that from ancient times until now, there was almost no one who used this method to revive a fetus before 1 month of age. It was also a real stealing of the good fortune of heaven and earth. It could easily cause the heavens to be jealous and devour the caster. If he didn't do it well, he could even summon the heavenly thunder and destroy the caster's soul. This technique was a big taboo in the immortal cultivation world. There were very few people who committed this taboo. Even if the child of a celestial family was miscarried before 1 month of age, they could have another one after they recovered. There was no need to sacrifice a big one for a small one. This was also the main reason why Rong Yuetian strongly opposed the idea of the Dizun when she heard about it. Shun Juli was a god. There were very few things in this world that could baffle him. There were also very few people or things that he really cared about. In his eyes, there was only whether he wanted to do it or not whether he could do it or not. He closed his eyes slightly, and his fingers continuously formed seals. Countless white lights flowed and danced on his fingertips. Following the movement of his fingers, the dried blood stains under his body actually began to turn bright red again. It slowly began to flow, like a bright red little snake climbing up the hem of his white robe, slowly climbing up the back of his hand, and spreading toward his fingertips. The blood-red snake grew thicker and thicker. It climbed onto his fingertips and began to coil around them. With a soft sound, a small white bone emerged from Shun Juli's palm. The bone was very thin, even thinner than a baby's finger. It was extremely white and bright, flashing with a faint light. This was not an ordinary bone, but rather a bone that Shun Juli had condensed using his divine blood essence. When it broke out of his body, his face was even paler, and there was almost no trace of blood. Refining this was obviously extremely painful. Although Shun Juli didn't show anything on his face, his white robe was drenched in sweat at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, he only pursed his lips and continued to form seals with his fingers. When the blood saw the small bone, it instantly swam over and circled around the small bone. Layers of red light slowly appeared on the white bone. Under the red light, the flesh on the small bone gradually grew, like a fetus growing rapidly in the womb. Gradually, it grew 4 limbs, a head, and became a small ball of flesh. After 2 hours, the technique to reconstruct the flesh was finally completed. He also finally stopped cultivating. His whole body looked like he had just been fished out of the water. Even his hair was drenched. Chapter 1524. He obviously wasn't used to his own sloppy appearance. He lifted his hand, wanting to use a cleansing technique on himself, but he had exhausted all his strength. Even lifting his little finger was difficult. He could only give up for now. He looked down at the small ball of meat in his palm. The ball of meat was curled up in his palm. Because it didn't have a soul yet, it was motionless. This ball of meat should be exactly the same as the one that Ning Xiuma gave birth to. Although he couldn't see the facial features, Shun Juli still thought it was beautiful. In the future, this child's facial features would be like his, and its mouth and nose would be like its mother's. Shun Juli could even imagine what this little ball of meat would look like after it was born. After completing this step, he would have completed half of the resurrection mission. He used his spiritual force to protect the ball of meat. Then he ate several pills and closed his eyes to rest for a moment. In the end, he was a god. His restorative abilities were amazing. A moment later, his white robes were dry and his long hair fluttered in the wind once more. He stood up and looked towards the direction of Carefree Island. He gently sighed. Shuema, our child will return soon. You should also return. After he protected the ball of meat, he began to cast another spell. This time, it was a soul-summoning technique. Carefree Island Rong Yuishanlin had just finished refining a furnace of pills when he seemed to sense something and suddenly stood up. He hurriedly walked out. Petals fluttered in the air. A crimson figure finally broke through the peach blossom array and rushed out, covered in peach blossoms. Shui Lan's entire body was suffused with a thick killing intent. His handsome face was like an azurus. Before Rong Yuishanlin could speak, he shot out a red beam of light. Stupid Rong Yuishanlin, go die. When he attacked with anger, his destructive power was naturally astonishing. As he attacked, strong winds whipped up as sharp as knives. Rong Yuishanlin couldn't dodge because behind him was his precious medicine field. If he didn't block this attack, all of the flowers and plants behind him would suffer a calamity. He could only lift his fan and forcefully receive this attack. He swung his fan back. The two ferocious forces collided with each other. It was as if thunder had struck in the air, causing the entire island to tremble. A small pavilion at the side could not withstand such an explosive force and was directly sent flying into the air, turning into a sky full of debris that fell down. Heavens, his tower and pavilion! He had built it purely by hand, brick by brick. His proudest work had actually flown away just like that. It flew away. Rong Yuishanlin was also angry. Shuilan, are you looking for death? The fan opened up, and a gust of wind gathered around it. It was about to fan Shuilan. He wanted to fan him out of the island. Shuilan laughed. Courting death? If you don't hand him over, I'll tear down your broken island. The two of them did not agree with each other and started a fight. Rong Yuishanlin was also annoyed. He wanted to teach Shuilan a lesson. Otherwise, this red-clothed evildoer would think that he, the island master, was easy to bully. He was afraid of destroying his flowers and plants, pavilions, terraces, and buildings. He simply activated the array formation in the middle of the fight and lured Shuilan into the array formation again. The two of them started to fight in the array formation. For a moment, the sky was dark and the earth was dark. The sun and moon did not shine. There was blood everywhere. There was blood under his feet, on his body, and on the stone road in the distance. Even the sky was bright red with blood. Ning Shuima's body was trembling. She couldn't help but tremble. She was repeating a dream. In the dream, she first happily sensed the existence of her child. Chapter 1525. In the dream, she first happily sensed the existence of her child. Then, she desperately tried to travel back in the dark sky. Then, she came to Bulow City to buy clothes for her child, until she was harmed by Luzine and had a miscarriage. Finally, it ended when she was slapped away. This dream repeated itself. Each time, it was more realistic than the last. Each time, it was more heart-wrenching than the last. It caused her mood to fall from the climax of joy to the abyss of despair. It also caused her to feel more and more hopeless. She only wanted to find a place to hide herself. She wanted to hide and ignore this world. She didn't want to feel this pain anymore. She had suffered a lot in her life. She was even thrown into a copper cauldron to be boiled. She thought that the pain was already the limit of pain. However, she didn't expect that the pain was nothing compared to the pain she was experiencing now. As the dream repeated itself over and over again, her stomach felt like it was being scraped by a knife. It was a pain of despair. It was so painful that she broke out in layers of cold sweat. She wished she could die immediately. She wanted to end her own life. However, she couldn't find her hand in the dream. If it wasn't for the heart-wrenching pain, she wouldn't have been able to feel her own body. She subconsciously wanted to escape, so she started to run. She ran without caring about her life. Running like this, she no longer had the same recurring dream. However, the pain in her body didn't decrease at all. A bloody road opened up in front of her. She ran on this endless bloody road. She wanted to escape from something, but she also seemed to want to pursue something. As she ran like this, she became dizzy from all the running. In the end, her mind was blank. She couldn't think at all. She didn't know why she was running. She also didn't know where she was going. This kind of running was subconscious. It was as if running like this would no longer hurt her body. The faint cry of a child came from the front. That cry was heart-wrenching. It caused her heart to clench. Her entire body froze. Then, she seemed to have remembered something. She trembled and subconsciously touched her lower abdomen. That place was deflated. Other than the overwhelming pain, she couldn't feel anything else. Baby. Her baby. Her heart seemed to be torn apart at that moment. She started to stagger and ran towards the crying sound with all her might. The crying sound seemed to be near yet far. However, it kept echoing in her ears. The intense pain and constant running made her extremely tired, but the child's cries made her unable to stop running. After running for an unknown amount of time, the crying suddenly stopped. The surroundings fell into silence, and not a single sound could be heard. Baby. She looked around in panic, but she could no longer hear the crying. However, a blood-red ball of flesh appeared in front of her, hovering not far in front of her. Ning Xiuma slowly walked over. She finally saw her child. Just like when she used her inner vision, it had arms, legs, a head, and a tail. It was curled up in a bag of blood. It seemed to be in great pain. It was trembling nonstop, and faint cries could be heard from it. She seemed to hear the child crying, "Mommy, it hurts. Mommy, it hurts. Boo-hoo, Mommy, it hurts. Mommy, just kill me. I don't want to be in so much pain." Over and over again, she cried out in pain, over and over again. At first, the voice was very soft, but then it became louder and louder. His voice pierced Ning Xiuma's heart like a knife, causing her to curl up subconsciously. Chapter 15:26. She reached out her trembling hand. "Baby, bear with it. Mommy will save you. Wah, no. It hurts, it hurts." The child struggled violently in the blood. Just like what she saw with her inner vision before the miscarriage, it kept twitching. Her child. The child that she was not fated to have. The child that she could not keep even after using all her means, perhaps. This was her fate. What you wanted could never be kept. Love was like this, and so was children. Ning Xiuma's eyes widened as she looked at the child who was crying and screaming there, and then inevitably melting bit by bit. Her heart was being dismembered inch by inch. She just looked at it like this, staring blankly, and her body kept trembling. Why? If she had done something wrong and loved the wrong person, then God would punish her. Why did he treat her child like this? What was wrong with the child? Just because it was considerate? Just because it was her child? It was unfair. She did not know how long she had been standing there stiffly. She slowly reached out her hand and stroked the meatball with her fingers. She closed her eyes slightly. "Baby, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Mommy will send you on your way. Soon, you won't be in pain anymore." Flames emerged from her fingertips and surrounded the meatball. In the flames, the meatball finally stopped struggling. She watched as the child slowly disappeared. It seemed that her whole heart had disappeared along with it. She fell into hell and could no longer climb up. The flames finally dissipated little by little. All the pain disappeared, and only hatred was left in her heart. Monstrous hatred. She slowly opened her eyes. Rongyue Tianlan and Shui Yingyue were fighting fiercely in the array formation. Rongyue Tianlan had not fought so happily for a long time. He felt very good. It was simply relieving the anger that he had been holding in for the past 2 days. Shui Lan was very angry. He just came to visit Momo and wanted to know her specific condition, but he was blocked by this perverted doctor. In his anger, he also fully activated his mode and used all his skills, trying to defeat Rongyue Tianlan. However, his and Rongyue Tianlan's skills were similar, and neither of them could beat the other for a while. Momo. How was Momo? He was burning with anxiety. The array formation that Rongyue Ishinlin had set up this time was rather strange. They could see the real situation outside, but when they really fought, they couldn't destroy the things in the real world outside. Shui Lan was still worried about Ning Xiuma. Even during the fight, he constantly scanned the surroundings, trying to guess where Ning Xiuma might be. This time, after he repelled Rongyue Tianlan's attack once again, he occasionally looked up and suddenly saw wisps of green smoke coming out from a building behind Rongyue Tianlan, as if there was a fire. Who was it that was so nice to burn down this broken island? No, I can't let this flirtatious Lan see this. It would be best if they were burned clean. Shui Lan subconsciously wanted to set up a barrier behind Rongyue Tianlan to prevent Rongyue Tianlan from inadvertently looking there. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. No, Ning Xiuma was still on this island. He didn't know if there was anyone around to take care of her. If there was no one around to take care of her, it didn't matter if this broken island was burned down, but if Ning Xiuma was burned down, it would be worth it. It's on fire. He couldn't help but shout. Rongyue Tianlan initially thought that he was deliberately mystifying and subconsciously replied, "How can it be on fire, my island?" Her gaze couldn't help but follow Shui Lan's gaze, and her face suddenly changed. Chapter 15:27. The building that seemed to be on fire was the place where Ning Xiuma was now. At this moment, he no longer cared about fighting with Shui Lan. His figure flashed and rushed towards that direction like a meteor. Shui Lan saw his face change, and knew that it was not good. His heart sank, and he also rushed there. Rong Yue Tianlan's speed was not slow. In the blink of an eye, they rushed to the front of the pavilion. The fire came out from the window. The red tongue of fire almost made Rong Yue Tianlan's heart sink to the bottom. God, Ning Xuema was still in the house. She looked so dull that she would not escape at all. If something bad happened to her, Di Zun would definitely kill him. Rong Yue Tianlan did not care about anything else. He kicked the door open and rushed in. Ning Xuema, nothing must happen to you. The moment he rushed into the room, he was stunned for a moment, something he rarely did. The house was indeed on fire, but it did not burn the furniture in the house. There were many things in the brazier in the middle of the house that were still smoking and burning, but there was no sign of Ning Xuema in the house. What happened? Rong Yue Tianlan subconsciously checked the things in the brazier. His heart suddenly shrank. Those things that were burned were children's rattles, small toys, special-looking books, and some special-looking papers. Even the little clothes that Ning Xuema had been holding in her hands were among them. Everything was burned in a mess. If one did not look carefully, they would not be able to distinguish them. Shuilan also rushed in. How is Momo? If anything happens to her, I will not let you off. Hey, where is Momo? He looked at the things in the brazier again and was a little suspicious. What happened? Momo is not in the house. Then why are you running like a funeral? What is in the brazier? Why are all the things burned our children's toys? Speaking of this, he suddenly realized something. Could it be that Momo burned it herself? She woke up. Rong Yue Tianlan said in a low voice, I'm afraid so. Great. Where is she now? Shuilan's eyes lit up. He quickly looked around the room, but he didn't see even a corner of Ning Xuema's clothes. A bad feeling arose in Rong Yue Tianlan's heart. His immortal skills were extremely high, and he was used to seeing through people's invisibility. If Ning Xuema was in this room, he could find her at a glance. What would she do if she woke up in such a situation and burned everything about the child? He didn't have time to think too much and dashed out. Split up and search. We must find her. At this time, Shuilan naturally couldn't pursue the matter any further and also followed them out. Rong Yue Tianlan could have opened his heaven's eye to search, but he had used up too much power recently and had just fought with Shuilan. His remaining telekinesis was not enough to open his heaven's eye in a short period of time. He could only mobilize all the disciples on the island to search. He didn't dare to use the voice-transmitting charm to inform Shun Juli. First, he knew that Shun Juli was using a forbidden technique to revive the child and couldn't be disturbed. Second, he still had a tiny sliver of hope in his heart. After all, there was an enchantment above the island, and it was sealed off. Ning Xuema shouldn't be able to run out of the island. She might be hiding in some corner sad. As long as he could find her, everything would be fine. For a time, Carefree Island was in chaos. Everyone was digging 3 feet into the ground to search for a single person. No. They had searched every inch of the island, but there was no trace of Ning Xuema. Chapter 1528. Rong Yue Tianlan was about to go crazy. Ning Xuema had just recovered from her injuries. Where could she hide? Shuilan was also anxious. Did she leave the island? Rong Yue Tianlan, doesn't your broken island have a wizardry barrier? If she left the island, you should be able to sense it, right? Rong Yue Tianlan was not in a good mood. If she broke the wizardry barrier, I will naturally feel it. So, she can't leave the island. She must still be on this island. Since she's on your island, why can't I find her? She can't turn into a mouse and crawl out, right? Is there a loophole in your wizardry barrier? How can there be a loophole in my wizardry barrier? No, there really is a loophole. Rong Yue Tianlan suddenly thought of something, and her face changed again. Her figure flashed, and she went to a place near the sea. She looked up, and there was a 2-foot square hole on it that was left behind when Shuilan broke in. Rong Yue Tianlan was busy fighting with Shuilan at that time, so she forgot to fix it. She only remembered it now. She had most likely escaped from here. The world was so big. Where could she go? Shun Juli stood in the same place, looking at his empty fingertips. Nothing. There was no soul of the child. He couldn't sense a trace of the child's soul. He didn't know how many souls he had summoned in his life. But this was the first time he encountered such a situation. Infant spirits had always been weak, especially those who were only 4 months old. They were even weaker. Generally, after death, their souls would be blown away by the wind, and there was almost no chance for reincarnation. However, with Shun Julie's ability, even if the infant spirit was blown into tens of thousands of pieces by the wind, he could use a special method to summon it back, not a single piece. This situation wouldn't have happened. Moreover, the child was the son of God. Its soul should be stronger than any other child, and it wouldn't be blown away so easily by the wind. Shun Julie used his own blood as a primer. If it was still there, it was impossible for it not to come back. Could it be that not only did Luzine kill the child, but she also destroyed the child's soul? But no matter how scattered they were, it was impossible for him to not be able to find a single piece. There were only 2 possibilities for this to happen. First, the child was not dead at all. It was still alive. Secondly, when its soul was drifting, it encountered some spirit beast that fed on souls and was swallowed by them. Shinjuli's hands and feet were cold. He could barely stand still. In Luzine's memory, he clearly saw that Ning Xiuma had indeed suffered a miscarriage, so it was impossible that she was still alive. Then, there was only the second possibility left. That child's soul had already been devoured. That kind of spirit beast feeds on souls. Even if he found the spirit beast, he wouldn't be able to find the child's soul. He had spent half of his divine power to resurrect this child. He was clearly just 1 step away, but he did not expect that the final result would be a failure on the verge of success. This was the only way for Ning Xiuma to recover. It was the only way for him to get her back. But now he had failed. He had failed. It turned out that Shun Julie, also had times when he failed, and there were times when he was powerless. Could it be that even God did not think highly of their fate and wanted to completely separate them? Was this the fate of him and her? Was this the fate that he had never been able to predict? No, he did not believe in fate. He steeled his heart and did not hesitate to use his divine power to summon the soul several times, but it was still to no avail. While he was busy, the voice transmission talisman at his waist suddenly lit up. It was a pale golden light. It was sent by Rong Yuetian. Chapter 1529. His heart sank. He had once told Rong Yuishinlin not to disturb him unless there was an emergency. But now he picked up the call. What is it? Emperor's throne. Miss Ning should have woken up, but she's gone. Rong Yuishinlin's voice was filled with panic. Rong Yuishinlin was quite amazing. In just a few short sentences, the first was a pleasant surprise, but the second was a bomb. Although Shun Julie was normally calm and collected, he couldn't help but grit his teeth. What do you mean she's gone? The sovereign's voice was so cold that even through the sound transmitting talisman, Rong Yuishinlin seemed to freeze. She didn't dare to be long-winded. She quickly explained the situation at Carefree Island to Shun Julie. Shun Julie clenched his fists in his sleeves. He didn't waste any more words with Rong Yuishinlin. He directly hung up the sound transmitting talisman and closed his eyes to sense where Ning Xiuma was. A moment later, his body stiffened and he opened his eyes. She was at the Sun Moon sect. Ning Xiuma hadn't done many immoral things in her life. As a former Secret Service agent, although she could be ruthless and merciless to her enemies and even use extremely cruel methods to torture them, she still had a bottom line. She paid particular attention to repaying kindness and enmity. If she owed a debt of gratitude, she would remember it in her heart and repay it when the time was right. For her friends, she would risk her life and not hesitate to travel thousands of miles. If she had a grudge against someone, if they didn't do it on purpose or if their actions offended her, she would laugh it off or simply strike back. If you punch me, I'll kick you back. She paid particular attention to being happy and comfortable. After fighting with such a person, they might even become friends. As for those who deliberately schemed against her, then sorry. Her life motto was, if you hurt me, I'll pay you back 10 times. If you stab me, I'll cut you into pieces. Before Luzine had done those things to hurt her, she didn't have any ill feelings towards her. After all, in this relationship, it was Shun Julie who had a change of heart and fell in love with someone else. It was related to this man and had nothing to do with Lu Ziyin. Shun Julie and Lu Ziyin were engaged. Although Ning Xiuema had lost her wits and suffered a huge blow, she had never had the urge to take revenge on Lu Ziyin. At most, he felt a little cold when he heard her call him Brother D at the engagement banquet. There was nothing else. She had her pride. Since her boyfriend had cheated on her and fallen in love with someone else under such circumstances, there was no need for her to make a scene at his engagement banquet and ruin his marriage just because she had a child. She just wanted to leave this place. She just wanted to bring her baby to another continent and live a peaceful life. She wanted to live a wonderful life that belonged only to her. However, what she didn't expect was that she would be secretly hunted down by the other party when she let go so easily. If Lu Ziyin had only plotted against her life, she wouldn't have hated her so much. However, this bitch had used a vicious scheme to plot against the baby she cared about the most. When she threatened Lu Ziyin to take out the antidote, she wasn't bluffing. She was telling the truth. That was the only chance she had given Lu Ziyin, but Lu Ziyin had been obsessed with her baby. Therefore, the moment she had a miscarriage, she plotted against Lu Ziyin. She wanted Lu Ziyin to pay a heavy price for this. She wanted Lu Ziyin to pay for her baby's life. No one could protect it. The moment Shun Julie arrived, he indiscriminately gave her a slap and sent her flying into a tree. He didn't know that she had just used a forbidden technique to defeat Lu Ziyin. He didn't know that she had just had a miscarriage and was still bleeding nonstop. Chapter 1530. Just because he saw his fiancée being mistreated, he had ruthlessly attacked her without the slightest bit of mercy. In that moment, in her grief, anger, and despair, she finally gave up. She wasn't someone who would easily despair. No matter what desperate situation she was in, she would always try to find a way to survive. But in that moment, she had fallen into an unprecedented despair. She never thought that after risking her life to return to this world, she would encounter such a result. Her lover had betrayed her, her child had been lost, and she could no longer return to her own world. There was nothing that could support her to continue living in this world. She had sought death with all her heart, so even though she knew she was bleeding profusely, she didn't do anything. Since she couldn't take revenge, she would accompany her child. What she didn't think was that there would be a day when she would come back to life. When she woke up on Carefree Island and saw her surroundings, she only wanted to laugh out loud. So she hadn't died. It seemed that Shun Julie had found his conscience and didn't want her to die too quickly. He had saved her and even sent her to Carefree Island to be treated by his friends. She didn't want to think about what Shun Julie's goal was. Whether it was to atone for Lu Ziyin's sins, or whether it was because he still cared about her, she didn't want to think about it. A life for a life, a debt must be paid. Since Lu Ziyin had killed her baby, she would pay with her life. She would pay with her life for her baby. If a god blocked her way, she would kill a god. If a Buddha blocked her way, she would kill a Buddha. If she had died then, that would have been fine. She would have let that Lu Ziyin off. But now she had come back to life. Since the heavens had allowed her to come back to life, she naturally had to take revenge for her baby. Thus, the moment she awoke, she had already decided what she would do in the future. She burned everything related to her baby in a brazier and severed all ties she had to this world. She knew that Lu Ziyin was Shun Julie's fiancé now. He would definitely protect her well. Just like how he had protected her before he lost his memories, he might also be inseparable. If she went to assassinate Lu Ziyin, there was a high chance she wouldn't succeed. If she angered him, he might even slam her into a wall or kill her. But she no longer cared. Her current life was something she had picked up from the ground. She would use her life to take Lu Ziyin's life. Lu Ziyin killed. Thus, after she finished burning those things, she immediately left Carefree Island and headed towards the Sun Moon sect. She had to end this quickly so that she could be free as soon as possible. When a person finally makes up her mind to do something, she will not think about anything else. She traveled as fast as lightning and arrived at Buddha Lotus Mountain very quickly. She paused in the air for a moment and lowered her eyes to look at the immortal mountain that she once missed so much. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. Without any hesitation, he pounced forward. She knew that there was a heaven's path that led directly to the heavenly sound peak. She knew that Luzine should be staying in the main hall where Shun Julie was staying. Not bad. Maybe it was because Shun Julie was too careless, or maybe it was because of other reasons, but that road was not closed. She successfully arrived above the heavenly sound peak. However, when she entered the heavenly sound peak, she encountered some obstacles. The enchantment on the heavenly sound peak had been reset. This enchantment was very powerful. Ning Shumo only needed to touch it to know that this enchantment was powerful. It should have been personally set up by Shun Julie. It seemed that Luzine was really here. Shun Julie was afraid that someone would plot against her, so he set up a new enchantment to protect her. Chapter 1531. She had never seen this enchantment before. It should be something that Shun Julie had researched and developed to protect the little fox. She narrowed her eyes and curled her lips. Without saying a word, she began to break the enchantment. Perhaps it was because she was going all out, but the enchantment was very easy for her to break. It was so easy that even she was stunned. She looked at her hands. It seemed like her skills had improved by quite a bit. It was even better if it improved. Then it would be easier for her to take revenge. She didn't think too much and immediately entered. After she entered, she paused for a moment when she saw the scenery inside. Jubilant. That was the only thing she could think of when she saw the layout of the room. The pavilions here were still the same. The only difference was that they had all changed into bright red new clothes. The most exquisite silk woven by sharkmen fluttered in the wind. The red coral from the deep sea was arranged in a double jubilant word in the large square. Each pavilion's horizontal board was inlaid with the finest red pearls. Each of these red pearls was the size of a pigeon's egg, and they were all priceless treasures. Now, they were inlaid here and there into various shapes of twin lotuses on one stalk, and they shone faintly in the night. Bright red. There were bright red colors everywhere. No matter where one looked, there was a bright red color that blinded one's eyes. Such luxurious and festive decorations actually appeared on the cold and solemn Tianyin Peak. If Ning Shumo didn't see it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed it. The scene of Shui Emo and Shun Jiuli's wedding suddenly flashed in her mind. At that time, the bridal chamber was decorated with a few strands of red silk. Shun Jiuli didn't even bother to wear a wedding dress. He only wore a white robe with a plum blossom embroidered on the corner as the only red color. She thought that he was destined to have no fate with bright red, but it turned out that things could change. Her gaze fell on the main hall. Once upon a time, she felt warm in her heart when she saw this. But now, this bright red color made her heart even colder. She just wanted to laugh. He really changed a lot for Luzine. It seemed like he thought that Luzine had been wronged, so he wanted to make it up to her with a grand wedding. She knew that she had hurt Luzine badly, but with Shun Jiuli's superb medical skills, he would definitely be able to help her recover. The image of Luzine's smug eyes flashed before her eyes. Brother D dotes on me a lot. He can't leave me even for a moment. Ning Shumo lowered her eyes, her lips curling into a smile. She didn't care how Shun Jiuli doted on Luzine. She also didn't care how Shun Jiuli would treat her as an intruder. She only had one thought, to kill Luzine and avenge her child. As for the rest, he could only deal with whatever came his way. She charged straight into the main hall. No one was allowed to enter Heavenly Sound Peak except for D Zun's direct disciples. And it was nighttime, so there was no one on Heavenly Sound Peak. Ning Shumo also knew Shun Jiuli's temper, so she didn't find it strange that there was no one else here. She was very familiar with Shun Jiuli's bedroom, so she didn't make any turns and went straight to the place where Luzine used to rest. That place was beside Shun Jiuli's bedroom. Luzine had suffered such a serious injury this time, so she must be resting there. But she didn't expect that the small side hall where Luzine stayed was gone. Chapter 1532. She couldn't even find a shadow of it. That's weird. Could it be that Shun Jiuli had used some kind of enchantment to hide it? Ning Xiuma circled the area 3 times, but she couldn't find any trace of that small side chamber. She couldn't find any enchantment either. She stood there in a daze, and her gaze landed on Shun Jiuli's bedroom. Could it be that he arranged for Lu Ziyin to be treated in his bedroom for safety reasons? Anyway, they were going to get married soon, right? With Shun Jiuli's character, it wasn't that he wouldn't do such a thing. At this point, Ning Xiuma was too lazy to think. Her mind was filled with the word revenge, and she refused to think about anything else. Since she thought of this, she naturally didn't hesitate to barge into Shun Jiuli's bedroom. The last time she barged in, Shun Jiuli had set up a very powerful enchantment outside his bedroom, and she couldn't barge in at all. This time, however, it was exceptionally smooth. The enchantment he set up outside his bedroom was actually broken by her easily. However, after entering, she was greatly disappointed. The bedroom was cold and empty, and there was no one inside. Of course, there was no Lu Ziyin. Ning Xiuma hadn't been to his bedroom for a long time. Although she only took a glance this time, she knew that the layout inside had changed completely. The once moon-white bed curtains had been replaced with a light blue one, and there was a vivid drawing of a snow-white little fox. That little fox was squatting in a bamboo forest, and a few tails were swaying behind it. Ning Xiuma's eyes narrowed slightly, and she took a step back. She remembered that Lu Ziyin was a white fox, and it seemed like it was drawn on the curtains. Since Lu Ziyin wasn't here, she couldn't be bothered to stay here for another second. She turned around and left. She searched the heavenly sound peak like a whirlwind, but she still couldn't find Lu Ziyin. Where would Shun Jiuli hide her? The Sun-Moon sect was so big. Where was she going to find her? She stood there and only felt that her head was buzzing, and she was at a loss. She pondered for a moment before descending the Tianyin Peak. She saw a few disciples of the Sun-Moon sect walking towards her. Ning Xiuma recognized 2 of them. They had entered the Sun-Moon sect at the same time as her. Each of them had a festive item in their hands. Although they were of different varieties, they were all bright red without exception. These people had excited looks on their faces. They did not see the invisible Ning Xiuma as they walked and talked. I never thought that we would be able to see the ancestor get married in our lifetime. I'm so excited just thinking about it. Yes. Even now, I still don't think it's real. This time, Guild Master Yi Lu has instructed us to do everything to the best of our ability. He couldn't be careless or leave any flaws behind. He also said that this was the ancestor's personal order. Therefore, you must carefully check the things in your hands and make sure that there is no mistake. I understand. This time, I will choose the red pearls one by one. I heard that Guild Master Yi Lu went to buy Luo-Si again. He said he was going to find the biggest Shun pearl to embed on the big red Shi character. How generous. It's really generous. Looks like the ancestor is serious this time. I just don't know who the bride is. Do you still need to ask? Of course, it's Miss Lu Ziyin. That's true. But I heard that Miss Lu was seriously injured. I haven't seen her come out these few days. And I heard about this too. The ancestor didn't appear either. He probably want to treat her injuries. This grand wedding should be to compensate her. Chapter 1533. Lady Lu is so lucky. The few of them chatted as they walked, unusually cheerful. Ning Xiuma hid in the darkness and suddenly wanted to laugh. She also suddenly felt tired. Shun Jiuli had hidden Lu Ziyin very well. She would not be able to find her even if she searched for 3 days and 3 nights in a row. She didn't want to waste any more energy, so she used the most direct method. She lowered her eyes and thought for a moment, then suddenly appeared in front of the few of them. I'm sorry, everyone. The sound transmission bell on the peak of the Sun-Moon Sect's mountain, which represented the occurrence of a major event, suddenly rang. The sound of the bell reverberated throughout the entire Sun-Moon Sect, alarming all the Sun-Moon Sect disciples. It was chaos on Buddha Lotus Mountain. No one knew what had happened, but when the bell rang, all the disciples had to put aside their most important work and rush to the plaza where they gathered. The plaza could hold thousands of people, and it was the place where the Sun Moon sect disciples gathered when something major happened. And at this moment, there were a few people standing in midair in the plaza. 4 of them were the Sun Moon sect disciples. They stood in front, their bodies stiff, and their expressions a little strange. And behind them, there was a girl in a red dress. She had beautiful eyebrows and beautiful eyes, and her silver hair fluttered in the wind. The moment everyone saw the girl's face, they were all stunned. Ning Xiaoma, the one who was expelled from the sect by the ancestor 10 years ago, the one who had always been the taboo of the Sun Moon sect, the one who shocked everyone with her dance a few days ago at the ancestor's engagement banquet. Why did she appear again? What's with her hair? Why is it all white? Also, why did she capture 4 of her fellow disciples? Everyone was confused, and they didn't know how to react to Ning Xiaoma, who was standing in midair. Yalu Jing and wasn't on the mountain, but the other elders of the Sun Moon sect were. They didn't know what had happened, so they all rushed over on their swords. There were many capable people in the Sun Moon sect, and there were naturally many who knew how to fly on their swords. So when they arrived, they surrounded Ning Xiaoma. Ning Xiaoma, what is the meaning of this? The person who asked the question was the 13th disciple of the ancestor. This person was the coldest and most old-fashioned. He was usually not on the mountain, but this time was a coincidence. Where's Lizine? Ning Xiaoma didn't stand on ceremony and asked directly. The people below looked at each other with blank faces. Obviously, they didn't know where Lizine was hiding. The 13th disciple frowned. Why are you looking for her? Ning Xiaoma, you were once a disciple of the Sun Moon sect. Do you know that kidnapping a disciple of the Sun Moon sect is a taboo of the Sun Moon sect? Ning Xiaoma smiled lightly. How could she not know? Kidnapping a disciple of the Sun Moon sect? Kill him without mercy. This was the iron law of the Sun Moon sect. But now, she didn't care at all. For a person who didn't even care about life and death, any discipline was meaningless. Tell me where Lizine is hiding, and I'll let them go. Ning Xiaoma stated her condition. Dream on. How can a disciple of the Sun Moon sect be threatened? Ning Xiaoma, I advise you to quickly let them go and wait for the ancestor to punish you when he comes back. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't be able to bear the consequences this time. Ning Xiaoma smiled lightly. Her smile was beautiful, but her eyes were cold. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. I only want to find Lizine. I'll give you 7.5 minutes. Either you tell me where she is, or you collect the corpses of these people. Ning Xiaoma raised her hand, and at the same time, 4 flying daggers flew towards the backs of the 4 captured people. They stopped when they touched their skin. Chapter 1534. She smiled again. My patience is limited. Don't disappoint me. She stood in midair, her silver hair fluttering in the wind. Her eyes were slightly red, and her smile was beautiful and enchanting. The disciples of the Sun Moon sect were speechless. Ning Xiaoma understood the disciples of the Sun Moon sect. She knew that they were all stubborn. If she interrogated them like this, there was a high chance that they wouldn't tell her. She didn't expect them to tell her where Lizine was. She was only doing this to force Shun Jili out. Then, she would put an end to it completely. She believed that most of the disciples of the Sun Moon sect didn't know where Lizine was, but there should be some who could contact Shinjili. He should be with Lizine. If she forced him out, she might be able to force out Lizine's whereabouts. She was very tired, very tired. It was as if there was a flood in her body, constantly attacking her nerves. Her mind would go blank from time to time, and she would be in a daze. Her actions couldn't be judged by common sense. If it was in the past, with her intelligence, she definitely wouldn't use such a stupid method. She would hide in the inner circle of the Sun Moon sect and slowly ask around. Once she found out, she would take action. But now, she didn't have much time left. She raised her head and looked at the sky. There were white clouds piling up like mountains in the sky. Every white cloud had a faint golden rim. At first glance, it looked like rays of light from the sun behind the white clouds. But now it was nighttime. Where would the sun come from? Tonight was the first night of the new year, and there was no moon. There seemed to be thunder rolling in the sky. The sound was very soft and almost couldn't be heard, so no one paid attention to it. Everyone's attention was focused on Ning Xiuema. They were afraid that if she raised her hand, someone would die an unnatural death. Now, Ning Xiuema's martial arts were terrifyingly profound. She could completely subdue someone with a raise of her hand. The elders and protectors of the Sun Moon sect were all experts in martial arts. When Ning Xiuema made her move, they knew that her martial arts were unfathomable. There was probably no one present who could be her opponent. Xiuema, don't do anything stupid. Release our fellow disciples first. Helian Xiao finally arrived. In the eyes of the Sun Moon sect, Ning Xiuema's actions were practically disgraceful. Once she slipped up and was captured, it would be difficult for her to escape the death penalty. Helian Xiao was originally cultivating in seclusion at the back of the mountain, but after he heard about it, he couldn't care about anything else and hurried over. He wanted to persuade Ning Xiuema to rein in the horse at the edge of the cliff, lest she did something irreversible. However, when he saw Ning Xiuema's appearance clearly, he was stunned. Her hair. Why did her hair turn white? He stared blankly for a moment before calling out. Ning Xiuema lowered her eyes and glanced at him, but ignored him completely. She seemed to be calculating something with her fingers. After a moment, she smiled softly and said, "No one said anything?" Her voice was cold and eerie, causing the 4 Sun Moon sect disciples who had been captured to instantly shiver. Originally, they thought that Ning Xiuema might not really hurt them because they were from the same sect. However, they didn't dare to think so now. They could already clearly feel the ice-cold chill when the tip of the knife touched their flesh. The expressions of the people below all changed. The flying knife that Ning Xiuema had released just now had a lustrous green tip, as if it was smeared with poison. They were very clear that Ning Xiuema's poison skills were superb. Ning Xiuema, if you really hurt a few of your fellow disciples, then there's no turning back. Let them go first. 13th Senior Brother's face was as gloomy as water. Mini theater. Little Apple, you seem to be very depressed. Of course. I haven't appeared for a long time, and the girls outside are already missing me. You're too boorish, too careless. Master is PK goddess voting, and he's afraid that your goddess will turn into a tomboy. Nonsense. When have I, Kiran, been boorish? I've always been very gentle. Okay. Speaking of which, what's up with the goddess voting? You don't admit that you're careless. You don't even know such a big thing. Go and look at the pin post in the comment section. There's a reward for voting. Reward. Kiran immediately widened his eyes. What reward? Master said that the goddess PK will start at 3 p.m. today. There's a guarantee of at least 8 chapters, more than 1,000 votes, and an additional chapter. So on and so forth. Wow, that's so good. Also, there's a reward for canvassing for votes. What reward? What reward? Tell me quickly. Canvassing for 10 people, cash red packet for 2 yuan canvassing for 20 people, cash red packet for 5 yuan canvassing for 30 people, cash red packet for 10 yuan, or a key ring canvassing for 40 people, autograph book canvassing for 50 people, autograph book plus cash red packet for 10 yuan canvassing for 80 plus people, mystery gift pack. Hey, Little Apple, where are you going? I'm not done yet. Stupid Phoenix. I'm not going to chat with you anymore. I'm going to the Kirin clan to recruit people. Chapter 1535. Ning Xiuema sighed softly. Looks like you've all turned a deaf ear to my words. With a flick of her finger, a dagger pierced into the back of one of them. That person's eyes widened, and his body swayed as he fell from midair. 13th Senior Brother's expression changed, and he caught that person with a wave of his sleeve. After taking a closer look, his face turned green. That person's face was green, and green blood was flowing out his back. There was no sign of life. She was really ruthless. Everyone's expression changed. Yalu Jing and had gone to the Jade Drop Sea. That was the blind spot of the voice transmission talisman. So before he left, he handed over all the matters of the Sun Moon sect to the upright 13th Senior Brother and the 8 Guardians on Mountain. This 13th Senior Brother didn't have much of a relationship with Ning Xiuema, Before the 8 guardians had drunk wine with Ning Shuima before, and they looked after her quite well. Now that she had suddenly done such a thing, their expressions changed. When Ning Shuima had entered Shun Jiuli's tutelage, she had spent most of her time traveling with him. Thus, only Yelu Jing could guess the way she interacted with him and the ambiguous feelings between them. The others weren't too sure, but they knew that the ancestor had looked after this little disciple very well. When Shun Jili got engaged, Ning Shuima's dance gave everyone a new perspective. They could feel that the ancestor and Ning Shuima did have some feelings, but things had changed with the passage of time. Now, there was Lu Ziyin by the ancestor's side. Ning Shuima had thrown her zither and left at that time, and now she suddenly came back to settle the score with Lu Ziyin. This, no matter how they looked at it, it seemed like she was obsessed with love and couldn't let go, and was looking for trouble with her love rival. No one understood the whole process, so they could only make inferences based on the clues they knew. Most of the people here had thought that Ning Shuima was a girl who dared to love and hate, and could let go of things easily. Now that they saw her like this, they were all shocked. The rules of the Sun Moon sect were strict, and no one was allowed to violate them. Back then, Yelu Jing had made a small mistake, and had been punished according to the rules. Now that Ning Shuima had caused such trouble, the people below immediately became noisy. 13th Senior Brother's face was ashen. Among the people present, he had the highest status, and he was also known for being the most impartial and strict. How could he allow Ning Shuima to be so arrogant? With a wave of his hand, the 8 great protectors and 10 great elders quietly spread out around Ning Shuima and surrounded her, sealing off all her escape routes. Ning Shuima was still floating there, as if she didn't see them. Her fingertips curled up again as she chuckled. It's almost time. I'll count to 3. If no one says anything, I'll have one more person to die in vain. 1. Shuima, you can't do this. They entered the sect at the same time as you. Back then, we played together and fooled around. Everyone really doesn't know where Lu Ziyin is. You can't continue to make mistakes. Helian Xiao suddenly flew up on a sword. He was probably really anxious as he rashly crashed into the encirclement. 13th Senior Brother never would have thought that he would be so reckless. He was unable to stop him and could only stare blankly as he entered Ning Shuima's attack range. His heart almost jumped out his chest. Helian Xiao was the disciple with the highest talent that the Sun Moon sect had accepted in the past few years. He was also the one who had the most hope of breaking through to the heaven stage in the future. He was also Yelu Jing, Anne's proudest disciple, and everyone treated him like a treasure. If anything happened to him... Chapter 1536. The formation that 13th Senior Brother and the others had set up was an extremely powerful formation of the Sun Moon sect. It was called the 18 Devil Capturing Formation. Once this formation was set up, the people who were surrounded wouldn't be able to escape even if they had 3 heads and 6 arms. They would either be captured or killed on the spot. This formation was personally passed down by the Venerable Emperor. It contained the profound principles of heaven and earth and was extremely powerful. Originally, 13th Senior Brother's next hand gesture was to activate the formation. He wanted to capture Ning Shuima as a warning to others, even if he had to give up the 3 low-level disciples who were captured. However, he didn't expect Helian Xiao to be a variable. This brat wasn't helping them to capture people. He was simply adding to the chaos. 13th Senior Brother's hand gesture was halfway through, and he abruptly stopped. Ning Shuima didn't seem to expect Helian Xiao to rush over. This brat's movements were as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of her. He was practically standing side by side with the 3 captives. Shuima, don't do anything stupid. He actually went past the 3 captives and directly reached out to grab Ning Shuima's arm. The moment Ning Shuima raised her arm, he shuddered and stood there like a large shield beside Ning Shuima's hand. Ning Shuima, use me as a hostage and break out. Helian Xiao transmitted his voice to her. Although he didn't know why Ning Shuima did such a thing, when he saw Ning Shuima appear here with a head of white hair, His heart twisted and almost twisted into a fried dough twist. When he saw the guardians and elders getting into formation, the blood in his chest instantly surged up. He didn't care what Ning Xiuama did, but he believed that she must have her own reasons for doing so. He couldn't just watch as she was captured or executed. Therefore, he steeled his heart and seized the opportunity to barge in and become Ning Xiuama's human shield. Ning Xiuama's eyes flickered. She didn't say anything, but suddenly kicked Helian Xiao and sent him flying. She only gave him a single word, scram. Helian Xiao never thought that Ning Xiuama would do this. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. He somersaulted in the air, and by the time he regained his balance, he was already outside the encirclement. He wanted to charge in again, but was stopped by two of his fellow disciples. 13th senior brother naturally wouldn't give Helian Xiao another chance. With a wave of his hand, the formation was immediately activated. 18 rays of light shot out from these people's hands, flying and intertwining in the air. In the blink of an eye, they formed a net of swords. The tips of the swords were all aimed at Ning Xiuama. Ning Xiuama, I'll give you another chance. Release the 3 of them. Surrender without a fight. Otherwise, I'll scatter your soul here. 13th senior brother made a hand seal with his finger. Ning Xiuama stood there. The heavenly wind billowed her clothes and messed up her hair. Her smile was alluring. She didn't say anything, but only gave a response. She flicked her finger, and the 3 flying daggers that were pointed at the backs of the 3 captives instantly pierced their flesh. The 3 of them groaned and fell down from the top one after another. The people below caught them. There were also people who didn't give up and checked the injuries of the 3 captives. They realized that they were the same as the first captive. Their faces were all green, and they were no longer breathing. Ning Xiuama, who was in the clouds, laughed. Suddenly, she raised her hand again, and countless green, flying daggers appeared on her fingertips. Every one of them was exactly the same as the one she used to kill the 4 captives. She squinted her eyes. Since no one is willing to hand her over, then let's die together with her. She bent her palm slightly, and those flying daggers were about to shoot towards the Sun-Moon sect disciples below. Chapter 1537. She bent her palm slightly, and those daggers were about to shoot towards her fellow disciple from the Sun-Moon sect. Her current martial arts could only be described as terrifying. She could kill people with just a wave of her hand. Furthermore, she was so cruel and merciless that she could kill her fellow disciples while laughing. This woman was crazy. It was unforgivable for such a person to not be punished. 13th senior brother shouted angrily, Ning Xiuama, you're courting death. You can't blame anyone else. He clenched his fist, and the flying swords in the sky were finally activated. Like a rain of locusts, they all shot towards Ning Xiuama. Ning Xiuama faintly smiled. Her fingers, which had been forming hand seals, suddenly loosened. The dark green daggers coiled around her fingertips suddenly disappeared without a trace. She didn't dodge or evade the flying swords that filled the sky. Instead, she opened her arms and welcomed the sword lights. The flying swords were swift and fierce, and the strong wind that they brought along caused her long hair and clothes to dance violently. She closed her eyes and welcomed those flying swords with a smile of relief on her lips. Let's end it like this. She couldn't find Lu Ziyin to avenge her child, and she couldn't force Shunjuli to come out. Then, she would die in the hands of his subordinates, which was equivalent to dying in his hands. It was also considered a relief. In it all, she didn't want to live anymore. Towards that person, she still hated him after all. In the end, she couldn't forgive him. Since she couldn't forgive him, then she would never have to forgive him, no matter if it was hate or love. Everything would end at this moment. She didn't have to have those recurring nightmares anymore. She didn't have to despair until her hair turned white because she couldn't take revenge. It turned out that she returned to this world for this ending. It didn't matter if he cared or didn't care. She wanted to use this method to end herself. In her previous life, in this life, she had completely repaid everything that she owed him. She didn't want to have another life. She just wanted to end it properly, This demon-subduing array could not only kill a person's physical body, but it could also kill a person's soul. Therefore, she forced them to use this array for this ending. Stop. An urgent shout came from the horizon. The sound almost shook the sky. A white light flew towards those flying swords like a raging tide. However, it was all too late. Those flying swords had already been launched, and the distance was so close, yet the other party did not do anything to block them. Even if those people sensed that something was wrong and wanted to retreat, they could not do so. By the time the white light collided with the flying swords, more than 10 of them had already pierced into Ning Xiuma's body. Blood spurted out from her body. Her body swayed in the air and fell to the ground. Xiuma, a shout almost tore through the air. A person flew over, his snow-white robe drawing a cloud-like arc in the air. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Ning Xiuma. He raised his hand to catch her falling from the air and held her tightly in his arms. Ning Xiuma. His voice was already trembling, his body was trembling, and his face was ghastly pale. He hugged her tightly and wanted to say something, yet his throat seemed to be blocked by a ball of cotton, and he directly choked on his words. Ancestor. Everyone couldn't help but stare blankly. The person who came was Shunjili. It was also the first time he appeared in front of the disciples without a mask. If it wasn't for his trademark white robe, and if it wasn't for his majestic aura, the disciples wouldn't dare to recognize him. Everyone was stunned and kneeled down again. Ancestor. Master. Chapter 1538. 13th Senior Brother's expression also changed. He had followed his master for so many years, but this was the first time he had seen his master lose his composure like this. Had he committed a grave mistake? He also knelt down, and his nervous heart almost jumped out his chest. Shunjili did not care about the crowd at all. There was no one else in his eyes. The moment he hugged Ning Xiuma in his arms and saw Ning Xiuma's appearance, his heart trembled uncontrollably. White hair. Her hair was actually all white. Needless to say, it was caused by her mood fluctuating too much after she woke up. The dress Ning Xiuma was wearing was not the dress he gave her at that time. Instead, it was an illusion she created herself. Although this dress was pretty, it did not have any defensive capabilities. The swords that were shot out from the demon-subduing array were all imbued with extremely strong psychokinesis. Not only did it hurt the body, it also hurt the soul. Even if Shui Alan was injured by the demon-subduing array, he might not be able to escape with his life. Not to mention Ning Xiuma, who had not recovered from her serious injuries. Her body was hit by 8 flying swords. Those flying swords were not real, but they were more powerful than any real thing. If the real thing was stabbed, as long as it was not pulled out, blood would not gush out. However, those 8 swords were not real, but they could cause the same result as real swords. They were all stabbed at her vital points, and blood was gushing out from her wound. Her originally black hair turned white and fluttered in the wind. Her originally flower-like dimples turned a bleak white. She fell into his arms covered in blood, and it made him feel like his heart had been stabbed dozens of times. It was so painful that it almost flipped over. He did not care about anything else. His palm continuously touched her body to stop her bleeding and applied the best medicine for her wounds. Xiuma, hang in there. I won't let you die. Hang in there for me. He spoke in a low, trembling voice. His hands did not stop moving as he treated her wounds. Ning Xiuma's eyes were black and did not have any light. Although her eyes were open, there was no light in them. She raised her hand to push him away, but she did not have any strength left. She did not want him to save her. She didn't want to lie in his arms. The way he treated her reminded her of how he treated Lu Xian's wounds. Perhaps he had just finished treating Lu Xian and rushed over. Because he felt that the woman was fine, she had once longed for this embrace. She never knew that she could crazily desire a person. How many nights had she dreamt of meeting him in the middle of the night? In her dream, she threw herself into his arms and hugged his waist tightly. Like a child, she complained about her grievances and cried loudly. The pillow would be soaked when she woke up. For this day, she risked her life to travel through time and space. For this day, she had tried her best to encourage herself when she couldn't find her way in space. Even if she was suffocating to death, she still persisted. Now that she had finally returned to his embrace, she no longer had that kind of desire. He hugged her tightly, very tightly. She didn't feel warm. She only felt disgusted. She didn't want to stay in this embrace any longer. When she thought of how Lizine was still acting coquettishly in his arms just a moment ago, she had the urge to vomit. She really threw it up. Large mouthfuls of blood spurted out from her mouth and sprayed all over Shun Julie's body. Shun Julie's expression changed. Her heart was already at the critical stage of breaking, but she still wanted to struggle without caring about her life. Chapter 1539. The psychokinesis in her body was surging, but it did not automatically repair her heart meridian. Instead, it was trying to forcibly tear it apart. She was asking for death. She was asking for death. Shun Julie, she called out his name in front of everyone. Her voice seemed to float from the sky, unbelievably ethereal. Don't talk. Shuama, don't talk. There are too many misunderstandings between us. When you get better, I will slowly explain everything to you. Everything is a misunderstanding. Believe me. Come, be good. Don't try to resist me. Let me connect your heart meridian. Shun Jili did not care about the blood on his chest. He pressed his palm on her back and poured his psychokinesis into her body. After entering her body, it condensed into a line and quickly flowed along her blood vessels, swimming directly to her heart. He tried his best to calm himself down. Ning Shuama's life was now in his hands. If he was not careful, her heart meridian would be completely broken. However, when his psychokinesis reached her heart, it encountered resistance. The resistance was not strong, but Shun Julie did not dare to move at all. Her heart meridian could not withstand a little fluctuation, so he could not forcibly enter to repair it. Shuama, don't try to stop me from saving you. He quickly said, I won't give up. I know you hate me. Let's wait until you get better, and then you can settle accounts with me. Okay? I'll let you kill me or cut me, but let me connect your heart meridian first. He tried to move his psychokinesis forward a little, but the resistance was even stronger. Momo, you're also a cultivator. You should know that even if you die now, I have the means to resurrect you. Don't be angry anymore. There was a threat in his voice. Ning Xiuma turned a deaf ear to his threat. She looked up at the sky. The white clouds in the sky had gathered around them. There was a golden light flashing in the depths of the white clouds, as if there was a golden dragon hiding in them, looking for an opportunity to pounce out and destroy the world. Boom! A sudden clap of thunder finally crossed the sky. Everyone's attention was originally on Di Zun and Ning Xiuma. The sudden clap of thunder startled them, and they looked up. When they saw the strange scene in the sky, they were overwhelmed with horror. This was the tribulation thunder, and it was the highest level of tribulation lightning. Who wanted to transcend the tribulation at such a sensitive time? Shun Jili also abruptly raised his head. The moment he saw it clearly, his body suddenly stiffened. Just as he froze, Ning Xiuma, who was originally powerless in his arms, suddenly struck his chest with her palm. Shun Jili was caught off guard, and his body swayed from the slap. Suddenly, he felt an emptiness in his arms. Ning Xiuma, who was covered in blood, rose directly into the sky. The golden light in the sky instantly enveloped her and enveloped her. Momo! Shun Jili pounced on her, trying to pull her out. But before his hand could even touch the corner of her clothes, it was blocked by the golden light surrounding her body. The moment the golden light enveloped Ning Xiuma, the turbulent white clouds in the sky instantly turned golden. Streaks of golden lightning flashed between the clouds as they prepared to strike. Golden lightning tribulation. Ning Xiuma was actually going to cross her tribulation at this time, and it was a golden lightning tribulation. How could this be? She was only at the 9th level of the Earth realm. Even if she wanted to ascend to the 1st level of the Heaven realm, it should be a purple lightning tribulation or a silver lightning tribulation. How could it be a golden lightning tribulation with the strongest evil aura in the world? This kind of tribulation could only be crossed by extremely high-level immortals or demons. What's more, this golden lightning was faintly shining with an extremely bright purple. Even in Shun Julie's memory, he had never seen this kind of lightning tribulation. Chapter 1540. Even if Ning Xiuama was at her peak, she wouldn't be able to survive such a lightning tribulation, let alone the weak Ning Xiuama now. Momo! Another shout came from afar, and a red figure flew over from the sky. It was Shuilan, and Rong Yuetian was following behind him. When the two of them saw the scene in front of them, their expressions changed. Shuilan rushed into the golden light without hesitation. Momo! Bang! He crashed directly into the golden light and was rebounded violently, almost causing him to fall off the cloud. He quickly steadied himself and looked at Ning Xiuama, who was shrouded in the golden light. His eyes were red. He rushed in recklessly. Momo, let me go in and block the lightning for you. When anyone was going through a lightning tribulation, the light would only cover the person going through the tribulation. If others wanted to block the lightning for him or her, they had to get the approval of the person going through the tribulation. In other words, whether it was Shun Julie or Shuilan, if they wanted to block the lightning for Ning Xiuama, they had to get Ning Xiuama's approval. At this moment, the golden lightning with a hint of red was about to strike. Ning Xiuama's red dress was shrouded in it. She closed her eyes slightly and looked up at the sky, not looking at the people outside at all. Ning Xiuama, let me go in. You can't block this lightning. Shun Julie's palms pressed against the golden light, and he quickly said with a pale face. No matter how calm he was at this moment, his hands were trembling. He was really scared. He had never been so scared. If he lost her now, it would be an eternal loss. If she couldn't survive the golden lightning tribulation, her soul would really be destroyed. Her soul would really disappear from the world, and no matter what he did, she would never come back. A huge panic engulfed him. If she didn't come back, if she disappeared just like that, then what was the use of him staying in this world? He was a god who thought that he was omnipotent, but now he couldn't even block the lightning tribulation for his woman. Ning Xiuama, you can't be so cruel. I know this is your best revenge, but I don't want this kind of revenge. He recklessly rammed into that damned golden light. Xiuama, listen to me. You've misunderstood me. I'm not engaged to Liziyin. I'm only engaged with her because I owe her a favor. I'm blocking the lightning tribulation. I like you. Let me go in and block it. Xiuama, listen to me. Xiuama. It was the first time in his life. The first time in his life he was pleading with her. Unfortunately, the person in the golden light did not seem to hear his words. She only opened her arms and faced the sky. Her eyes were slightly closed, and her eyelashes were long. The expression on her face was very calm, as if she had finally completely let go, as if she was welcoming a grand destruction. That's it. It's the end. She'd be to hear bees, as she was be to hero. Or maybe she's too lazy to believe him anymore. Ning Xiuama, Shun Julie shouted angrily, and hit the golden light with both his palms. He was a god. He didn't believe that he couldn't break through the golden light and barge in. After all, Ning Xiuama was still enveloped by the golden light. If he forcefully attacked the golden light, it would shatter the golden light and shake Ning Xiuama who was inside it. She might even lose her life. Therefore, he didn't want to use this move unless it was an emergency. But now, the golden light was about to hit her. Part 2. Chapter 1541. If he did not make a decision now, Ning Xiuama, who was enveloped by the golden light, would be struck by the lightning tribulation. Not only would her physical body be destroyed, even her soul would be destroyed. Thus, he had no choice but to attack forcefully. He only wanted to pull her out and protect her in his arms against the lightning tribulation. She might not be able to survive this time, but he could protect her soul. As long as her soul was still there, he could forcefully reverse the cycle of reincarnation and rebuild her body. Ning Xiuma, no matter what, you have to give me a chance. Give me a chance to redeem myself. Give me a chance to explain everything to you. The power of a god could destroy the heavens and earth. The palm wind that contained all the power of a god could not be described with mere words. The blazing white light collided with the golden light, and an extremely terrifying sound of collision rang out. It was truly earth-shattering. The surrounding trees were uprooted from the impact, and their leaves withered. Not far away, the pavilions and terraces collapsed from the impact, turning into countless pieces of rubble that flew into the air. This sound of collision was like a magnitude 8 earthquake. Even the ground beneath their feet was twisted and distorted. Although the martial arts of the Sun Moon sect disciples present were not weak, they were still unable to withstand such a frightening impact. Although everyone tried to defend themselves, they were still shaken into a mess. Those who were slightly weaker directly spat out blood from the impact. The unbreakable golden light finally cracked open under Shun Jiuli's fatal attack. Shun Jiuli was about to fly in. Boom! The golden light that surrounded Ning Xiuma suddenly exploded with a layer of bright red light. That red light instantly filled the gap that the golden light had just cracked open. Shun Jiuli's body collided with the red light, and he was once again stopped in his tracks. Almost at that instant, a thunderous sound rang out beside his ears. A bolt of golden lightning with hints of purple finally struck down. Ning Xiuma, who was within the golden light, did not have any intention of resisting at all. She was directly struck by that purplish golden lightning. Momo, Xiuma. The two figures pounced on the golden light in vain, but they were bounced away again. The golden lightning did not care if the person in the light resisted or not. Once it started, it would strike again and again at the petite figure in the golden light. The golden lightning illuminated the ground, and the brightness was not something that the human eye could accept. Furthermore, the sound of the tribulation thunder was not something that humans could withstand. It was so loud that it caused their ears to buzz. One after another, the sound of thunder exploded in their ears. Almost everyone subconsciously closed their eyes. He covered his ears. Some of the new disciples were so scared that they squatted on the ground, unable to stand up. This was probably the first time they had seen such a situation. Finally, the thunder that shook the sky came to an abrupt stop. Finally, the golden lightning disappeared. Finally, the golden clouds in the sky turned white again, as if nothing had happened. The golden light finally disappeared, but the person shrouded in the golden light also disappeared. There was not even a trace of her in the air, as if this person had never appeared in this world. The wind blew, and there was still the fragrance of grass and trees in the wind, but she no longer existed. Shun Jiuli stood in the same place blankly. His clothes, which were always neatly buttoned, were in a mess. His snow-white robe was stained with blood and mud, and it was almost impossible to see its original color. Embarrassing. For the first time in his life, the venerable sovereign, who was like a god, was in such a sorry state. All of his elegance seemed to have disappeared. He stared blankly at the place where the golden light had once been. It was as if the figure that he loved and hated was still there, as if she had not left. Chapter 1542. Countless memories whistled into his mind and converged into a vast ocean that practically drowned his entire consciousness. Ginseng baby, come into my arms. When he first met her, she grabbed him like he was a ginseng baby. Jiozun? That's a weird name. Are you trying to be like Dizun? He's an old man. You're not. Be good, be obedient. Would you believe me if I said I came from another time? The guns, cannons, and rocket launchers you saw in my dreams are all from my time. Han Shanyue, I don't have any grudges with you, right? Why are you scheming against me? Master Han, I knew you would come. You would come to save me. Great God, I'll call you Great God. In my time, Great God is a very powerful title. It's an honorific. Great God, come, let me tease you. Great God, what do you take me for? Don't tell me you want me to be your concubine. Let me tell you, although I like you, I will never be your concubine. Don't even think about it. Great God, why do you have to wait until Earth rank level 8 to tell me the answer? You're keeping me in suspense again. Forget it. I'll wait until I reach level 8, where nothing now, you're not allowed to kiss me again. Great God, you should lose weight. You're so heavy, great God, Ma. Great God, are you going to be gone for a long time? Okay, 10 days. I'll wait here for you to come back. I promise I'll be good. I won't run around. Wave after wave of memories surged through his mind like a tidal wave. It made his face even paler, his body even stiffer. Memories. All the memories about her were like seawater. Every wave was floating with her figure, her voice, and her smile. She called him Great God. She liked him so much that even a blind person could see it. She was proud because he couldn't give her an answer to marry her, and she didn't want to be intimate with him. She was such a proud and carefree person. She had waited for him on the Tianyin Peak for a month. In the end, she was plotted against by Wu Mo and almost lost her life. She had been locked up by Shuilan for 10 years. After being rescued by him, she was so happy that she was about to explode. When she was in his arms, she clutched his clothes tightly. She looked like she was crying and laughing at the same time. She was laughing, but her eyes were red. She had always loved him, like moths to a flame. He had asked her to wait for him for 10 days, but in the end, she had waited for 10 years. In the end, he would lose his memory and treat her as a stranger, only treating her as his disciple. In the end, he only remembered her previous life and confused her current life with her previous life. After recovering the memories of his past life, he had treated her as Shui Mo from the start. He had even suspected that she had come to his side for some unknown purpose. Shunjuli, I'm Ning Shuima, not Shui Mo. Don't always put her dead on my head. Why do you always treat me as her? So what if she's my previous life? There's no need for me to always bear her debt, right? Why do you always treat me as her? I've said it before, I'm Ning Shuima, not Shui Mo. She lived a carefree life and didn't want to be burdened by her previous life. But to her, the two men in her life both treated her as another woman and erased everything about Ning Shuima. He only remembered everything about Shui Mo, so he always thought that she loved Shuilan. Chapter 1543. How could she know she was wrong? Everything was wrong. No matter if it was the previous life or this life, she loved him, always loved him. She had never loved anyone else. She desperately escaped from that black hole, desperately returned to this continent, just to return to his side, just to have a happy family of 3, but he gave her a slap in the face. I came to sincerely ask Ancestor for advice. Ancestor, do you really want to marry Miss Luzine? Indeed, it has nothing to do with me. It's me who asked. I wish Ancestor and Miss Lu to grow old together and be forever in love. Formed by the Pipa, and then scattered by the Pipa. Ancestor, the fate between you and me ends here. He slapped her, who had a miscarriage, away and left with another woman. Shinjuli, I hate you. You will regret it. Scenes of the past were as clear as yesterday, and all his memories came back. She was proud of herself. She was smiling. She was angry. She was happy. She was smiling. It turned out that even without the existence of the previous life, she had truly walked into his life. She was Ning Shuima, not Shui Mo. She was a free and unrestrained woman from another time and space. Not the demon princess who carried too much on her shoulders. Shuima. His body trembled more and more, and his face became paler and paler. Amnesia. He was a coward in the previous life. In order to forget her, in order to not suffer anymore, he made such a frequent amnesia oracle. But he didn't expect that after going around in circles, he would fall in love with her again, and because of this damned amnesia, he would completely lose her now. Ning Shuima, you are ruthless. Using such a tragic method to choose to let go. Using such a tragic method to take revenge on me. Ning Shuima, how can you be so ruthless? How can you? You can't. I can't let you go like this. Even if I have to reverse heaven and earth, reverse yin and yang. I want you back. Shu Ma, didn't you do everything possible to let me recover my memories? I recovered. I recovered. You came back, bastard. In the end, you killed her. Shui Ilan finally came back to his senses. His eyes were completely red. Red light shot out from both of his palms as he recklessly attacked Shunjili. Shunjili didn't even know how to dodge. He just stood there, and the candlelight around his tall figure seemed to elongate his back. Rangi Yuishinlin was finally angry. He didn't expect that Ning Shuama would end up like this. When Ning Shuama disappeared after being struck by the tribulation lightning, his heart almost sank into hell. He blamed himself and regretted it. Before Shunjili left, he asked him to keep an eye on Ning Shuama and not let anything happen to her. However, he thought that she was too stupid to do anything and left her alone in the house. Now that Dizwa and Dizwa had caused such a ruckus, he had to take half of the responsibility. If he had stayed by her side and explained everything to her the moment she woke up, perhaps she wouldn't have forgiven Dizwa temporarily. However, she wouldn't have been in such despair to the point where her hair turned white. She wouldn't have not resisted the tribulation lightning at all and wouldn't have allowed others to block it for her. She was clearly asking for death. She was clearly using her final and tragic method to take revenge on Shun Jiuli. Rong Yuishinlin had been busy helping Shun Jiuli break the golden light. When Shun Jiuli broke the golden light with his palm, he was almost deafened. He was also busy helping the Sun Moon sect disciples who had vomited blood from the shock to quickly recover. He didn't want more people to die because of the Emperor's loss of self-control. Chapter 1544. When the golden lightning of tribulation came crashing down, he knew that everything was over. Now that he saw Shui Ilan attack Shinjuli, he was enraged. He lifted his fan and blocked Shui Ilan's killing moves. Are you crazy? Shui Ilan, if it weren't for you coming to the island to cause trouble, she wouldn't have left Carefree Island. If it weren't for you shamelessly sticking by her side, Dizwa wouldn't have had those misunderstandings. Do you still have the face to blame him? Shui Ilan, you are the bane of their relationship. Shui Ilan's face paled once more. He staggered back several steps and slumped down his sleeves. Yes, blame me. Mo Wuji suddenly laughed. Blame me? Momo, I've wronged you. With a wild laugh, he flew up and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Rongyue Tianlan didn't think that Mo Wuji would leave so quickly without any hesitation. He finally relaxed. In these troubled times, if this demon were to go crazy here, the consequences would be unimaginable. As he looked up, he saw Shun Juli's movements. His complexion changed. Shun Juli stood there, turning a deaf ear to everything around him. His slender, jade-like fingers were dripping with blood, but he didn't care. His fingers moved in the air again, and a white light burst out from his fingertips. This was the most powerful soul-summoning technique. With his own divine power as a guide, even if someone's soul was scattered, he could use this technique to summon back a few wisps. Dizwa, you can't do this. Rongyue Tianlan rushed over, wanted to stop him. But Shun Juli clearly had an enchantment around him. Rongyue Tianlan was blocked outside, causing him to panic. Not only was using this method to defy the will of the heavens, but it also consumed a great deal of divine power. If something went wrong, Shun Juli might disappear. Not to mention that Shun Juli had used forbidden techniques and divine power again and again. He was already at the end of his tether. Rong Yuishinlin even found that there was a white light overflowing from his body. This was a sign of the 5 decays of celestial beings. If this great god was allowed to continue like this, perhaps the only god in the world would no longer exist. However, Rong Yuetian couldn't find any way to stop him. Shun Juli's movements were very fast. After a while, he slowly stopped and looked at his fingertips. His fingertips were empty. He had already used such a method, but he couldn't even summon a fragment of her soul. He didn't say anything. Instead, he took a light breath and used it again. Rong Yuetian watched helplessly from the periphery as he used it again and again in despair. Shun Juli seemed to have sunk into madness. or perhaps he had sunk into an abyss of despair. Using such a method to punish himself, the air around him seemed to have sensed his emotions. The originally clear sky was suddenly overcast with dark clouds. Thunder and lightning flashed in the distance one after another. He did not know where the heavy rain had come from. The birds in the sky screamed and soared into the sky. The mountains nearby and the ground beneath his feet were trembling. If God's emotions were too intense, it would affect the climate of the entire continent. It might even cause the sky to fall and the earth to crack. The consequences were unimaginable. If this went on, he would also die. Rong-Yue Tianlan knew that she should stop him, but she couldn't think of any way to do so. She was so anxious that she walked around in circles. Her hand accidentally touched something in her sleeve. It was hard and slightly warm. There seemed to be an ancient aura circulating on it. When Shun Julie's palm struck the golden light, it had caused the sky to fall and the earth to crack. Chapter 1545. When Shun Julie had struck the golden light with his palm, it had caused the sky to fall and the earth to crack. Coupled with the continuous strikes of the golden lightning, the surrounding large rocks flew up into the sky and fell down one after another. One of the small stones coincidentally fell on Rong-Yue Tianlan's shoulder, causing a bruise to appear on his shoulder while he was busy. He was about to brush it away when his fingers accidentally touched it. He actually felt a little ancient aura from it. Thus, he casually stuffed the stone into his sleeve and forgot about it in the midst of his busyness. Now that he had accidentally pinched it again, he took it out to take a look. The rock wasn't big. It was about the size of a pebble and was bright red. There were flowing lights changing inside it. He could even feel a little divine power from it. His heart skipped a beat. This rock wasn't an ordinary rock. It seemed to be alive and full of spirituality. It definitely wasn't something that could be produced by the surrounding mountains. What was even more strange was that the aura on it seemed to be similar to Shun Julie's. Rong-Yue Tianlan was used to recognizing treasures, but it was his first time seeing such a strange rock. He looked at the red rock and suddenly thought of Ning Xiuma's red dress. This small rock seemed to have fallen from the sky after Ning Xiuma was struck by lightning and disappeared. Could it be a relic refined by Ning Xiuma? No, a relic shouldn't look like that. No matter what, this rock appeared like that. It also seemed to have Ning Xiuma's aura. He didn't hesitate and waved the rock in his hand at Shun Julie. Look at what this is. It has Miss Ning's aura. Shun Julie, who was desperately summoning the spirits, suddenly froze. In the next moment, he had already stretched out his hand to Rong-Yue Tianlan. "Give it to me." Rong-Yue Tianlan placed the stone in his palm and quietly approached him. "Dizwa, take a look." Oh my God! He could finally get close to Dizwa. Rong-Yue Tianlan clenched her fists in her sleeves. Just as she was about to use her celestial technique to knock out Supreme God, who was already at the end of his rope, she suddenly saw his expression as he held the small stone. She was stunned. The hand seal that he had just formed was also silently released. He stared at Shun Julie with his eyes wide open. The ancestor's expression was very strange. It can't be. That stone was really Ning Xiuma's. Shun Julie was holding the small stone, and even his fingers were slightly spasming. A child. The moment he sent his godly power into the stone, he sensed a child's aura. To be more precise, it was the aura of the soul of the fetus in Ning Xiuma's womb that he could not find in the heavenly Book Mountain. That soul had left its mother's body for such a long time, but it was actually very complete. It was even more complete and healthy than when it was in its mother's womb. After all, this was his child. It was the blood of father and son. When he sent his godly power in, that little soul first shrank inside. Then it stretched out a small hand and tried to touch his godly power. Then it simply hugged his godly power with its hands and legs and even rubbed against it. He did not expect it to be hiding here. He did not expect it to still be alive. This was the child that she cared about the most, the child that she cared about with her life. If he could find a step earlier and let Ning Xiuma see it a step earlier, Perhaps the outcome would be different. Unfortunately, until the moment her soul dissipated, she still did not know this good news. He held the small stone tightly and looked up at the sky. His body trembled slightly, but he did not speak for a long time. Chapter 1546. When she was Shwe Emo, she stuck to him every day like a dog-skin plaster, as if she wouldn't be able to live without him. But in the end, she still didn't hesitate to take his heart blood and leave, all for the sake of saving that man. The man she had depended on for 300 years. Because of that mistake, he lost a disciple in the immortal world. He lost a wound in his heart that could never be healed. He didn't care that she was a witch from the demon world, but he couldn't ignore the man by her side. She hurt him time and time again for that man, and each time she did it without hesitation. In the end, she even left with that man and disappeared for 10 years. In these 10 years, she had never appeared. Back then, when he placed her in the medicinal cauldron to refine the devil in her body, he had left a part of his soul to protect her soul. Later on, when she was rescued by Shwe Ilan, he had never taken back that small part of his soul. That was why he was able to sense her whereabouts in the Tian-Ci continent. When he wanted to find her, he was able to find her accurately. Even if she went to outer space, as long as she wasn't too far from the Tian-Ci continent, he could sense her. For example, the immortal country. When he came back from the immortal country, he was extremely dispirited and locked himself in a place to cultivate, probably because his mood was too unstable. During his cultivation, his anger leaked out along with his divine chi. As a result, the entire Tian-Ci continent suffered a disaster. At that time, the Tian-Ci continent would sometimes rain heavily, and sometimes cold winds would blow. Even in the summer, snowflakes would dance. The climate was extremely abnormal. When he found out, countless crops had frozen to death, and countless people had starved to death. He knew that he couldn't go on like this, so he left the Tian-Ci continent. Probably because his mood was too unstable, or maybe because he was too unlucky, he was hit by an abnormal ray that suddenly appeared in the sky. This ray didn't take his life, but caused the wound in his abdomen to explode. In the end, he fainted in the country of Jade Water, which was full of fox immortals. He was saved by the Jade Water Fox clan leader. He was a god and wouldn't get hurt easily. Once he got hurt, it couldn't be cured by normal treatment. In addition, his mood was unstable and he didn't have the desire to heal, so it was even harder to heal. It was the Fox clan leader who sacrificed his own fox pearl to heal his injuries. When the Fox clan leader lost the fox pearl, he lost more than half of his power. When it rained, the Fox clan leader experienced the heavenly tribulation at this time. He couldn't withstand the lightning tribulation and his soul dissipated. Before he died, he entrusted his daughter, Luzine, to Shun Julie and asked him to take care of her on his behalf. When Shun Julie was injured and unconscious, it was Luzine who took care of him. Shun Julie didn't tell her his real name and just casually said that his surname was D. Therefore, this Luzine happily called a brother D every day. He didn't want to have too much interaction with the Fox clan. Originally, he planned to leave after repaying the debt of gratitude, but he didn't expect to encounter such a situation. From the Fox clan leader, he knew that Luzine was carrying a disease in her womb. If a person with this disease couldn't go through a thunder tribulation before he was 3,000 years old, his body would automatically ignite with the Red Lotus hellfire, and his soul would disappear from the world. Although Luzine was pretty, her talent wasn't that good. It had been close to 3,000 years, but she had only reached Earth Stage Level 9. She couldn't advance to Heaven Stage, so she couldn't go through a thunder tribulation. Chapter 1547. The Fox clan leader's last request was to ask Shun Julie for help. No matter what, she had to undergo the lightning tribulation when she was 3,000 years old. Shun Julie agreed. Shun Yi's promise was worth 10,000 gold. The spiritual energy in Jishui country wasn't as dense as in Tian-Ci continent. In order to let Luzine reach heaven rank within 10 years, Shun Julie brought her back to Tian-Ci continent. Lu Xing was a nine-tailed fox, and Shui Emo's original body was also a nine-tailed fox. Although he was injured by Shui Emo, he still had a special feeling of caring for nine-tailed foxes. He placed her in a place with the densest spiritual energy to cultivate and gave her all kinds of elixirs to nourish her. However, Lu Xing was indeed useless and couldn't be compared to Ning Xuema. In these 10 years, her psychokinesis progressed slowly. She cultivated to the critical point of Earth rank level 9, but she just couldn't pass it. Shinjuli was too lazy to explain his actions to his disciples. Almost on the day he brought Lu Xing back, he didn't wait for her to take a breath and threw her to a place with the densest spiritual energy for her to cultivate in seclusion. That place had dense spiritual energy and low risk, so Shinjuli was very assured and didn't care about her for a year. In the end, after she was released, Lu Xing's cultivation didn't improve much, but her grievances did. Whenever she saw Shinjuli, she would cry like raindrops on pear blossoms. She was locked up at the point that she couldn't speak. Shinjuli rarely felt guilty, so he followed her request and brought her down the mountain to see the world. Lu Xing took the opportunity to ask for this and that. Shinjuli didn't lack money the most, so no matter what she wanted, he would satisfy her at any time. Lu Xing loved to laugh. Her laughter was like a silver bell, which easily influenced others to laugh with her. Shinjuli stayed with her. Although he didn't have any thoughts, he didn't annoy her, and his mood was a little better. In those years, there was no news of Ning Xuema, and he couldn't sense her at all. But after all, she had a part of his soul. He knew that she was still alive, but he didn't know which corner she was living in. He understood that it was time for him to let go. He also had to walk out. Otherwise, the heavenly bestowal continent would suffer another calamity. Therefore, he was also trying his best to adjust his mood so that he could return to his former self. If he wanted to return to the past, he had to return to living alone. Moreover, he was not in the mood to let anyone else stay with him at the heavenly sound peak, not even Lu Xing. Therefore, other than going to places with dense spiritual energy to cultivate, Lu Xing had always stayed in the small courtyard that the Sun Moon sect had specially built for her. Every year, Lu Xing's old illness would act up for 2 days. Shinjuli had to use his psychokinesis to support her from time to time in these 2 days. For the sake of convenience, he emptied the miscellaneous hall next to the bedroom. When he was treating her old illness, he let her stay there. Once he had overcome his old illness, he immediately asked her to leave. As the final stage approached, Lu Xing still had no intention of going through the lightning tribulation. Her body was getting weaker by the day, and her old illness was acting up more frequently. In the end, it was almost once a month. Shinjuli knew that he couldn't delay any longer. Since he had promised the Fox clan leader, he couldn't go back on his words. There were only 2 ways to help Lu Xing go through the lightning tribulation. The first was for her to rise to heaven ranked level 1. The second was for them to get engaged. To be Shinjuli's wife, she had to go through the lightning tribulation. The lightning tribulation that the god Empress had to go through was the heaviest. And Shinjuli didn't even think of marrying the god Empress now. Although he was heartbroken by Ning Xuema, he didn't think of marrying a god Empress to make things worse. But Lu Xing's lightning tribulation was imperative. Therefore, he had an idea, and that was to get engaged. Chapter 1548. The lightning tribulation that Lu Xing had to go through during the engagement should be about the same as when she ascended to the heaven stage. The engagement was just a formality. After helping Lu Xing overcome the lightning tribulation, he could cancel the engagement at any time. Of course, he didn't want Lu Xing to misunderstand and have any thoughts about him. Therefore, he told Lu Xing about the pros and cons in advance. He also made it clear that after helping her overcome the lightning tribulation, his promise would be fulfilled. He would send her back to the country of Jadewater, and they would have nothing to do with each other in the future. Everything was explained very clearly, and Lu Xing also agreed very readily, agreeing to it without hesitation. This betrothal was actually a deal to fool the heavens. Julie did things according to his heart and didn't have any taboos. If Ning Xuema was by his side, he naturally wouldn't use the engagement to fool the heavens. However, he had already given up on Ning Xuema and returned to being a bachelor. An engagement ceremony that could be canceled at any time was nothing to him. He thought that he didn't care about the engagement ceremony, but when the day came, Ning Xuema's figure kept flashing in front of him. His state of mind started to become unstable, and he had the urge to cancel the engagement ceremony. However, the date of the engagement ceremony was already the last day of Lu Ziyin's lightning tribulation, so he couldn't cancel it. However, he didn't expect Ning Xuema to suddenly appear at the engagement ceremony. When she asked him if he really wanted to marry Lu Ziyin, he couldn't say no in front of everyone. Otherwise, when the engagement ceremony was over, the lightning tribulation wouldn't arrive on time. Moreover, when he saw Ning Xuema, his state of mind was extremely unstable. There was a hint of joy in his anger and sadness in his joy. He thought that she was here for Shuilan again. In the end, Ning Xuema smiled and gave him her blessings. She even danced for him and Lu Ziyin. Finally, she smiled and left. From the beginning to the end, he didn't see her sad expression. She was smiling from the beginning to the end. At that moment, his heart, which had finally calmed down, was once again stirred up by her. Looking at her smile, he had the urge to tear her apart. At that moment, he sadly realized that he hadn't forgotten her at all. He simply couldn't let her go. After she left, Lu Ziyin wanted to continue the wedding with him. He was frustrated and wanted nothing more than to follow Ning Xuema and drag her back to ask her what she wanted to do and what she was thinking. At that moment, his mind was in turmoil. Lu Ziyin reminded him a few times, but he didn't hear anything. It wasn't until the clouds in the sky suddenly rolled and the tribulation clouds appeared that he finally came to his senses. Lu Ziyin had actually leveled up at this time. He heaved a sigh of relief. According to their previous agreement, he rose into the sky to block the lightning tribulation for Lu Ziyin. Logically speaking, this kind of lightning tribulation didn't mean much to him. However, because Ning Xuema had just come and severed ties with him in such a way, he was often distracted even when he blocked the lightning tribulation for Lu Ziyin. Probably only a venerable emperor would dare to be distracted while blocking the lightning tribulation. Of course, his injuries were also more serious than he had expected. After blocking the lightning tribulation, his promise to Lu Ziyin would be considered complete. Naturally, there was no need to complete the engagement banquet. Therefore, after he came down, he didn't care about anything at the engagement banquet and went into seclusion to recover. Before he went into seclusion, he also instructed Yelu Jing and to send someone to take care of Lu Ziyin. After her injuries were healed, she could be sent back to Jade Water directly. There was no need to repay him. However, he didn't expect that something so irreversible would happen. When he looked back, he was already 100 years old. Everything couldn't go back. Chapter 1549. Xuema, our child is back. When will you come back? I will let you come back. Then come back to my side. Rong Yuetian looked at him with trepidation. Although he didn't know what Dizwa was thinking, he knew that the small stone he had picked up had a big effect. Most importantly, Dizwa's spirit seemed to have returned a little. Dizwa, he called out tentatively. Tianlan, prepare some things for me. Shun Jili said, naming a list of things in one breath. Being able to ask for things was a good thing. At the very least, he wouldn't seek death in the near future. Rong Yuetian agreed without hesitation. Shun Juli held the small stone as if it was the most important treasure in his life. His figure flashed and disappeared. Rong Yuetian also disappeared. The things Dizwa wanted weren't easy to find, so he had to make the best use of his time to get them. Only the disciples of the Sun Moon sect were left looking at each other in dismay. Their faces were pale, and they didn't know what to do. Everything that had happened just now was like a nightmare to them. Ning Xuema disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. The ancestors seemed to have gone crazy. Almost everyone present could feel the bone-piercing sorrow coming from him. When a god grieves, all living things are hurt. At that time, the emotions coming from the ancestor infected everyone present, making them feel inexplicably flustered, trembling, and wanting to cry. That kind of God's sorrowful aura made it hard for everyone to breathe. Tears streamed down their faces, and they couldn't lift their heads. The 8 great guardians, the 10 great elders, and the 13th senior brother all had deathly expressions. They didn't expect the ancestors' feelings for Ning Xiuema to be so deep. They also didn't expect this outcome. Ning Xiuema was injured by their hands. They had actually injured the ancestors' most important person. Even if the ancestor didn't punish them, they were already so regretful that they wanted to commit suicide. The 13th senior brother lowered his head and looked at his hands. He had shot out one of the 2 psychokinesis swords that pierced Ning Xiuema's heart. His master had treated him with kindness as heavy as a mountain, but he had destroyed the person his master cared about the most. A short sword suddenly condensed in his palm, and he stabbed it towards his own heart. 13th martial uncle. One of the protectors reacted quickly and grabbed his hand that was holding the sword. "I'll let you down, master." 13th senior brother's face was filled with grief. 13th martial uncle, you can't be blamed for this. Ning, Martial Aunt Ning did it on purpose. After all, she killed a disciple of the Sun Moon sect. You weren't wrong to give such an order. Just as he said this, someone in the crowd suddenly exclaimed, "It's alive!" 13th senior brother and the others were startled and immediately looked in that direction. One of the disciples, who had just been placed down and killed by Ning Xiuema, suddenly sat up. His face was full of confusion. I'm not dead." 13th senior brother's heart skipped a beat. He flew over and checked Sukei's body. Then, he lowered his hands, and the regret in his heart grew even stronger. That disciple's back had been stabbed by Ning Xiuema, and a lot of frightening green blood had flowed out. Moreover, he had died on the spot. That was why people thought that he had been killed by Ning Xiuema. However, after careful examination, they found that the wound wasn't deep. The poison wasn't a life-threatening poison, but a poison that could make people appear to be in a state of suspended animation. In other words, Ning Xiuema didn't really want to take the lives of these hostages. It was just a means of coercion. Chapter 1550. In other words, Ning Xiuema did not really want to take the lives of these hostages. It was just a means of coercion. Everyone immediately checked the injuries on the other 3 hostages. They were exactly the same as the first one. They believed that they would wake up soon. 13th senior brother took a step back and looked at the direction where Ning Xiuema had disappeared. He had mixed feelings. He thought that his junior sister had really turned into a demon and could kill without batting an eyelid. He did not expect it was his fault. It was because he had taken things for granted that he didn't investigate the specific injuries of the murdered disciples that he made such a huge mistake. He suddenly raised his hand and cut off the tendons in his hand. He then raised his head with sweat all over his forehead and coldly instructed the disciples, "Our sect has made a mistake and caused irreparable losses. Now we are cutting off the tendons in your hands as punishment. When the ancestor returns, we will go to our master and apologize with our lives." Miss Ning is the most important person to the ancestor. Although she is dead, we have to clear her name. No one is allowed to disrespect her. The Sun Moon sect was the #1 sect in the world. When it wanted to clear someone's name, it was naturally very easy. Hence, a few days later, when people mentioned Ning Xiuema in the Tianxi continent, no one dared to slander her. The martial arts world was spread about her deeds of saving people. There were even some commoners who started to set up a memorial tablet for Ning Xiuema and offer incense. These were all stories for later. After more than 20 years, Marquis Ning's residence still maintained its original look. The current owner of Marquis Ning's residence was Tom. He managed Marquis Ning's residence well. The pavilions and terraces were still the same. The only thing that changed was the people who used to live in Marquis Ning's residence. The servants had basically all changed. Uncle Zhong had also passed away. When Shun Julie arrived, he did not alarm anyone in the residence. He directly entered the house where Ning Xiuema used to live. It was obvious that Tom was still very loyal to Ning Xiuema. After so many years, there was not a single change in the furniture. Every item was wiped clean. Even the comb and mirror that she used in the past were still there. It was as if she was still living here and had never left. Shun Julie slowly sat on the gums, his fingers gently stroking the bedding. Although Ning Xiaoma hadn't lived here for long, this was her first stop in this world. Therefore, if she still had a remnant of her soul, perhaps there would be a trace of it here. Everything was still the same here. Shun Julie sat there, and it was as if he could see the woman he yearned for day and night was still here. He sat with his eyes lowered, and a familiar pain came from his heart. Xiaoma, no matter what, I will definitely bring you back. I don't believe that I won't be able to save you even if I use all my strength. He moved his finger and was about to use the soul-searching technique when a voice came from his sleeve. This is the place where my mother lived? I want to see it. The voice was extremely tender and childish, but the words spoken were very adult. Shinjili didn't say anything. He took out a small blood-red stone from his sleeve and placed it on the table. The blood-red stone flashed and appeared to be semi-transparent. There was a small fetus swimming happily inside the stone. Shun Julie studied this stone for a long time, but he still couldn't figure out what it was. However, he could see that the spiritual power of this stone was very strong. Although it looked very small, the space inside was very big. His son's soul could happily roll around and grow in it. Chapter 1551. The space inside the red stone was a real mustard seed space. That day when he found his precious son hiding in here, he had always kept it close to him. When Rong Yuishanlin gathered all the things needed to revive the children, he took it out and used his divine power to draw its soul out. He didn't expect that the little guy would hug his divine power and play on a swing at first. When it realized that he wanted to take it out, it immediately let go of his divine power and swam into the depths. It was obvious that it didn't want to come out. Normally, little souls would be eager to be reborn. He didn't expect this little guy to be different. Shenjuli had to coax it and tell it that he wanted to revive it, but the little guy didn't buy it. It just hid there and didn't want to come out. Shenjuli was impatient and wanted to use force to force it out. He didn't expect that before he could do anything, it would cry like a baby. Its cry was heart-wrenching, and it could even call for its mother. Shenjuli had never dealt with such a small child in his life. He didn't know if other children were as naughty as this. When it cried for its mother, Shenjuli's heart softened. He couldn't bear to force it. Although the little guy wasn't immune to his divine power, it seemed to be very wary of him. Ever since it realized that he wanted to get it out of the red stone, it had been avoiding him. Rongyue Tanlan, who was watching from the side, wanted to laugh. She gave an idea to the ancestor. Dizwa, children need to be coaxed. If you tell it about your identity, perhaps it will listen to you. After all, it is its biological son. Shenjuli paused. Then, he told the red stone his identity. I am your father. I won't harm you. I just want to save you. The red stone flickered for a long time. Finally, the little baby's confused voice was heard. Husband? I'm a baby boy. Shenjuli was speechless. Wasn't this child a little too precocious? It was still in its mother's womb. How could it know so much? What he didn't know was that when Ning Xiaoma was pregnant with it, she chatted with it almost every day. Gradually, it learned a lot. Shenjuli explained to it, I'm not your husband. I'm your father. He felt that this word was probably too difficult for such a small child to understand, so he changed it to something easier to understand. I'm your father. The red stone paused for a moment and suddenly flicked. The child angrily replied, I'm your father. Rong Yuetian, who was beside him, spurted out unkindly. When Shenjuli glanced at him, he immediately coughed and said, This child is indeed the son of God. He is so precocious. Dizwa, take your time to communicate with it. This Xiaoxian will go and prepare other things. Shenjuli naturally suppressed the urge to smash the stone against the wall. He slowly communicated with it and talked to it. After all, it was the nature of father and son. After some difficult communication, the child finally acknowledged him. Through the conversation with the child, Julie also knew that there was another universe inside the red stone. It was simply a natural place to nurture a fetus. The child had only stayed here for a few days, but regardless of whether it was wisdom or soul, it had become much stronger. Julie originally planned to cage the child in his body after he was resurrected and nourish it with his own flesh and blood. Now that the stone had this function, he didn't need to force the child. However, it wasn't appropriate for the child to be in a soul state. Therefore, he took out the small body he had made for the child and let the child's soul enter it by itself. Chapter 1552. Therefore, he took out the little body that he had made for the child and let the child's soul enter it. Then, he cast a spell to send the little body into the red stone. This stone was also strange. After the fetus entered, it automatically produced a liquid filled with spiritual energy, wrapping the fetus within. The little thing swam around inside, as if it was in its mother's womb. It was very comfortable. Julie only needed to drip a drop of God's blood on the stone every day. The little guy grew very fast in the stone, even faster than when it was in its mother's womb. When Julie brought it back to life, it could not speak very well. It was a little confused. However, after more than 10 days, it was able to communicate with Julie normally. Julie realized that his child was a chatterbox. Whenever it was free, it would chat with him in the stone. It even complained that he was not as talkative as its mother. Julie was initially annoyed by the noise and wanted to ask it to shut up for a while. However, when it mentioned its mother, it immediately made his heart ache. For the first time, he chatted with it for a while. Julie wanted to look for Ning Shuima's soul everywhere. Naturally, he would bring it with him. The father and son were inseparable. The little guy was very curious. No matter where they went, it would come out to have a look. This time was no exception. It had already taken shape in the small stone. It looked like a standard fetus, but it matured much earlier than other children of the same age. Its limbs, head, and face were completely humanoid. At this moment, it swam over and looked at the scenery in the stone. It murmured, "It turns out that mother used to live here." It stretched out a small hand and put on the stone wall. "I really want to touch this place." It blinked its eyes and said with a sad voice, "Nien Mom misses mother." Julie's heart ached. Since the child could talk to him and recognized him as its father, it often cried and said that it missed its mother. It missed its mother's voice and wanted her to talk to it. Later on, it probably knew that it was useless to think about it, so it did not often say this. However, it often repeated some of the words that Ning Shuima once said to it. It was about to cry when it was about to cry. When it was about to cry, it comforted itself. Mommy said that men bleed but don't cry. They can't cry casually. Once they cry, they will be cowards. Only girls can cry. I'm a baby boy, I won't cry. I want to be a real man after I'm born. After comforting itself like this, it was able to hold back its tears. Ning Shuima had taught her child well. He knew so much. Julie was gratified, but his heart ached at the same time. If she was still alive, if she was by his side right now, how happy would their family of 3 be? Unfortunately, Lord Father, can you really find mother and bring her back? The little guy looked at him from inside the stone. Yes. Julie only replied with one word. He calmed himself down and began to perform the ritual. A moment later, his arm slowly fell. This time, it was the same as countless times before. He still could not find a trace of her soul. Every time he went to a place, he would start with a weak hope, but he would be disappointed. These days, he had been to countless places. They were all places that Ning Shuima had been to and stayed in. Every place was a place that she used to miss. Now, the scenery of those places was still there, but the person who held his arm and enjoyed the scenery was no longer there. Her shadow was in all these places, but he could not find a trace of her soul. Chapter 1553. She really didn't seem to have existed in this world. There were only 2 possibilities for this to happen. First, she really had nothing to live for in this world. So, she didn't want to leave any place that she liked. Second, she didn't die. She was reborn somewhere, and according to the situation at that time, the first possibility was the most likely. As for the second possibility, wherever a reborn person landed, there would be a strange phenomenon. It wasn't that he didn't have this kind of faint hope, so he had already given the Emperor order. Sun Moon sect, other sects, and even the entire Tianci continent, as long as they heard of any strange phenomenon, they had to report to him and investigate. But no, he didn't hear any news about this. He even personally went to the demon realm to investigate, but there was nothing. As for the other continents, he had sent all the disciples who could pass through the space gate to different continents. Now, there was no news back. Every news that came back was disappointment. Although Shun-Juli was a god, he couldn't bear to be disappointed again and again. When people were at the end of their rope, they would seek immortality. When immortals were at the end of their rope, they would seek immortality. When a god was at the end of their rope, who would they seek? Father? Father? The small stone bounced into his palm and bounced there. Shun-Juli looked down at it. The little fellow's ability was getting stronger and stronger. It could already control the stone to jump around. Is there still no mother here? The little fellow asked cautiously. The little fellow withered for a moment. It was also hit by this kind of disappointment that its little heart became stronger. Then, Father, can we rest here for a night? This is Mother's bed. I think the three of us can lie on this bed. Although the child was a god's child and was stronger than ordinary children, it was still a child. It wasn't even born yet. Even a newborn child longed for its mother's embrace, let alone a small fetus like it. Although this stone was good, it didn't have the warm and stable feeling of being in its mother's body. It longed for its mother's embrace, longed for its mother's breath, longed for its mother's voice. Unfortunately, it couldn't obtain these longings. Shun-Juli's heart ached. Originally, he taught his child to be independent and not be influenced by emotions. But now, all right, he replied. She spread out the blanket that she used to cover herself with, loosened her outer robe, and laid on the outer side of the bed. She placed the small stone in the middle of the inner side. Little stone rolled around in the quilt. It was obvious that he was looking for his mother's scent. After rolling a few times, it stopped next to his arm and stopped moving. Obviously, it didn't smell Ning Shuama's scent in here. After all, this was the house she used to live in 20 years ago. Even if these blankets were from the past, after so many years of drying, how could they possibly retain her scent? Little Shurtu was listless and didn't say anything. Shun-Juli's heart ached unbearably. He paused for a moment, then took out a set of clothes from somewhere and placed it in the crook of his arm. This set of clothes had been worn by Ning Shuama before, and there was a little bit of her aura on it. He had always been reluctant to take it out, for fear that the aura would dissipate every time he took it out. But now, for the sake of the lost child, little Shurtu froze for a moment under the clothes and suddenly jumped up. Chapter 1554. Little Stone froze for a moment under the clothes. Suddenly, he jumped up and directly jumped into the clothes. He rolled around in the clothes. Mother, mother, mother's smell. It seemed to be crazy with joy. It manipulated the little stone to roll around every corner of the clothes and greedily sniff the smell inside. After rolling around for a while, it suddenly cried out, "Mother, when will you come back? Niema wants to hear her talk. I want to be hugged by her." Perhaps it had been suppressed for too long. This time, it finally could not help but cry. Shun-Juli did not speak. He only hugged the clothes and the little stone in his arms, as if he was still hugging her and the child. He closed his eyes slightly. In the dark night, where no one could see, tears slowly flowed from the corner of his eyes. "Shuama, where are you? How can I find you?" The little guy was tired from crying. Finally, it crawled into the abdomen of the clothes and curled up there to sleep. Occasionally, he could hear it sobbing. Although the sound was soft, it was like a whip whipping his heart. His heart was very painful. It was like a drill slowly drilling there, making his whole heart convulse. He did not make a sound. He closed his eyes and slowly waited for the pain to subside. A few stars were shining outside. It was late at night, and the little guy was already asleep. The color of the red stone had also dimmed. It seemed that it had fallen asleep with the little guy. Shun-Jili sat up and looked at the stone for a long time. He knew that the stone was not from this world. From the little guy's long-winded talk, he knew that Ning Xiuma once went back to her own time. She had many friends there. Of course, the little guy's mind was not fully developed. At that time, it was in its mother's stomach and could not see anything. Its perception of the outside world was basically based on listening. It listened to the people there and listened to its mother talking to it. Therefore, when it talked to Shun-Jili, it was not coherent. Sometimes it would even confuse Zhang San's story with Li Si's family. Every time it talked about its mother, Shun-Jili would not interrupt it. Instead, he would encourage it and listen to it greedily. Then, he slowly organized and connected the dots according to the known clues. Through guessing and guessing, he was able to get a pretty good grasp of the situation. He knew that Ning Xiuma was lost in space and almost suffocated to death. He knew that she went back to her own time, but desperately wanted to come back. Shun-Jili had recovered the memory of his previous life. He knew how much Ning Xiuma wanted to go back to her time. She went back and desperately wanted to come back. Of course, it was because of him, because she could not let him go and she could not bear to leave the child in her womb. This small stone was given to her by her friend. She had put it in her storage space at that time. After that, too many things had happened, so she had probably forgotten about the existence of this small stone. At that time, Nianma was trapped by Lu Xin. His little body was killed. His soul panicked and ran around. He accidentally bumped into the little Gun Nianma, and the little Gun Nianma immediately wrapped him up. The miscarriage also hurt Nianma's soul. He slept in the little Gun Nianma's stone for a long time. If Shun-Jili did not check on him, he would still be sleeping. After all, he was the son of God. He was naturally sensitive to the power of God. Chapter 1555. After all, it was the Son of God, so it was naturally sensitive to divine power. Therefore, after it stayed by Shun-Jili's side, it recovered faster and faster and became more lively. Now, the child was safe, but the child's mother was nowhere to be found. Shun-Jili sat alone in the quiet night for a long time before he got out of bed. He picked up a pen and paper and started to draw. The person in his memory was very clear. He could draw her appearance even with his eyes closed. As he drew carefully, a woman gradually appeared in his drawing. Her lively eyebrows and slightly curved red lips were all in his memory. He stood in front of the table and drew one picture after another. Each picture was of her in a different form. Some were smiling, some were angry, some were shy, and some were proud. Every picture was of her, and every picture was vivid. It was as if the person in the picture was looking at him. His heart seemed to be hurting more and more. On the contrary, he liked this pain. Only with this pain could he feel that he was still alive. It was as if he was punishing himself. He couldn't draw a picture of sadness. No matter how much he drew, no matter how vivid his drawings were, they were just drawings after all. He couldn't touch her, hear her, or feel her. The paper on the window gradually became clear, and the sky gradually brightened. Another day passed, and another morning came. Another day of hope, and finally despair. He was drawing to the end of another painting when there was suddenly some movement behind him. Pa! Little Shirtu jumped onto the table. It had probably just woken up and was still a little confused. It jumped on the edge of the table and swayed, almost falling down. Shun-Jili caught it and put it on the table. Be careful. Little Shirtu swayed again, and the little guy's gaze fell on the painting. Is this Mommy? It's so beautiful. Your mommy is the most beautiful. Shun-Jili replied. In this world, in his eyes, there was no woman more beautiful than her. The little guy was obviously happy. It jumped on the painting. This is the first time I've seen Mommy. It stretched out its little hand and put it on the stone wall, as if it wanted to touch the hand of the person in the painting. This hand had gently touched it through its belly countless times, letting it feel the warmth of being protected. In the past, every time it used its little hands to touch its belly, it would get a response from its mother. It even heard its mother humming a strange song, something about a big-headed son and a small-headed father. Big hands holding small hands and walking to the end of the world. More than once, she had used her hand to touch its little hand across her belly. She had even made a promise. Baby, you're going to grow up and be born soon. Then, Mommy will be able to hold your hand and walk. At that time, I can take you to play a lot of things. Therefore, at that time, Nianma had an obsession to hold his mother's hand and walk with her. It must be a wonderful feeling. Now it finally saw its mommy. Mommy was as beautiful as it had imagined, but she refused to raise her hand to match fingers with it. Nianma felt a little wronged. He tried to kick it with his little feet and nudge it with his little butt. The painting was just a painting, and it would not give him any response. In the end, it simply jumped onto the hand of the painting. Mommy, hug me. Shun Julie felt a suffocating pain in his heart. Some of the little guy's unconscious movements often made him have the urge to cry. He put down the brush and held the little shirtu in his palm. He touched it with his finger across the stone wall. Father will be with you. In the future, Father will hold your hand and walk with you. He could not continue. Chapter 1556. Nianma carefully touched his finger and asked, Father, will you leave me in the future? No. Shunjuli made a promise. I will watch you grow up. Nianma pouted. Mommy said the same thing, but she did not want me anymore. I miss her so much, but she did not come back to see me. Your mommy loves you the most. Don't worry, as long as we work together, she will come back. Well, let's look for her again. It was easy to coax a child. He was finally happy again. He jumped on the table again and looked at the stack of paintings. There are so many mommies. Can I have one to look at? While he was talking, he had already stretched out his little hand and tried to pull a painting across the stone wall. Perhaps he had practiced a new skill in the stone wall, or perhaps he was obsessed with it. The painting flew automatically, as if it was pulled by an invisible hand and drilled into the stone wall. When Shun Julie wanted to stop it, only a corner of the painting was left. Little Nianma cheered from the inside. It really came in. Oh, it melted. The paper was just ordinary paper, and the painting was just an ordinary painting. Naturally, it was not waterproof. However, there was amniotic fluid around little Nianma. When the painting went in, of course, it became soft and wrinkled. The paint on the painting was also blurred. Wow, Mommy is gone, little Nianma cried. Shunjuli was annoyed. He quickly cast a cleaning spell to melt the paint inside, so that the liquid inside would not be contaminated and make the little guy sick. After everything was done, he added a small waterproof wizardry barrier on one of the paintings. Then, he used a spell to send the painting in. Finally, the little guy was happy again. Shunjuli suddenly seemed to notice something. He waved his sleeve and put the small stone on the table into his sleeve. There was a sound of footsteps outside the door. The person paused at the door. Shuemo, are you back? The voice was young and magnetic. It was a little retroflex, and the tone was a little strange. Shunjuli was slightly surprised. It was Tom, the chastity-testing beast. He coughed lightly and said coldly, Come in. Tom was startled. His hearing was amazing, so he still had a deep impression of the ancestor's voice. After being stunned for a moment, he immediately pushed the door open and entered. Greetings, ancestor. Shunjuli waved his hand and asked him to get up. His fingers moved slightly, and a wisp of aura quietly circled around Tom. Then he lowered his eyes. Tom didn't have the aura of Ning Shuema's soul. Tom was still a little uneasy when he saw the number 1 person on the continent. Ever since he became a human, he had also grown up. However, the speed of his growth was a little slower than that of a normal human. She looked like she was about 16 or 17 years old. Shunjuli didn't usually talk to people casually, but now he talked to Tom for a while. He knew that Tom and Ning Shuema were from the same era. He wanted to know more about that era and their transmigration experience. He now suspected that Ning Shuema had returned to her own era after the calamity. However, when Tom passed through the Treem people, he fell unconscious and woke up as a beast. Although he was familiar with the things of that era, he didn't know how to go back. Shunjuli didn't get any valuable clues from him, so he turned around and left. Father, where are we going to find Mommy? A voice came from his sleeve. Nianma was very curious. These days, his father had taken him to many places. The ice field, Mount Yuehua, Chongkong Kingdom. Chapter 1557. Both father and son had left their footprints in every place, and little Nianma gained a lot of knowledge. Every time they went to a place, his father would go in a hurry and then return slowly. Little Nianma was still very sensitive. He could clearly feel Shun Julie's emotions, from hope to disappointment and then to despair. Every time they went to a new place, his father's emotions would go through the same cycle, which made little Nianma feel a sense of unbearable weight. Father, we will look for Mommy slowly. There is no rush. Don't be sad. The little guy was very considerate when necessary. Okay. Shenjuli only responded with one word. He also felt that his emotions were probably affecting the child too much, so he took a breath and said, "Let's go to the Kirin clan." Little Apple brought Hong Ti to the Sun Moon clan to seek refuge with him. At that time, he had just recovered the memory of Shui Mo and recognized that Little Apple was Long Chuan's relative. Moreover, at that time, he was preparing to expel the devil in Ning Shuama's body. He did not want Little Apple to disturb him, so he simply sent it back to the Kirin clan. As for Hong Ti, it was a devil phoenix. Although it did not do much evil, there was evil in its body. It could easily strengthen the power of the devil in Ning Shuama's body if it stayed with her. Therefore, Shun Julie sent the little phoenix to a forbidden place with purifying power to practice. It would take at least 20 years to purify it successfully. The location of the Kirin clan was very secretive. Only a few people in the entire Tianxi continent knew about it. Shun Julie was one of them. One of his apprentices was born here. More than 3,000 years ago, he was injured and woke up here. They had not seen each other for 10 years, and Little Apple had grown a lot. Initially, it was discriminated against in the Kirin clan. When Shun Julie sent it back, it was specially taken care of, so its kind did not discriminate against it. Moreover, Little Apple had learned a lot from Ning Shuama and Shun Julie over the years. It was no longer an ignorant person. After returning to the Kirin clan, Little Apple also made up its mind that it should practice hard so that it could face its master in the future. Therefore, it had been practicing in isolation for the past 10 years. When it heard the news of the D Zun's arrival, it immediately rushed over. It was already able to transform into a human form. Now, it looked like a 13 or 14-year-old boy. D Zun, where's my master? This was the first thing he said when he saw Shun Julie. Back then, it and Ning Shuama depended on each other for survival. In its heart, Ning Shuama was no longer just a master with whom it had established a blood contract, but a friend who had gone through life and death together. In these 10 years, it missed her very much. However, it could not enter and leave the Qilin clan as it pleased, so it could only endure it. The Qilin clan was isolated from the rest of the world and was not on the Heavenly Bestowal continent. Therefore, the events that happened on the Heavenly Bestowal continent did not reach the Qilin clan. Little Apple didn't know that Ning Shuama had gone through a tribulation and her soul had been destroyed. When it saw Shun Julie, the first thing it thought of was Ning Shuama. Naturally, it asked the question it was most concerned about. Shun Julie did not speak. He extended his divine sense and circled around Little Apple. His fingers slowly lowered. It could be said that Little Apple was Ning Shuama's most important thing when she was alive. Now, there was no trace of Ning Shuama's soul by its side. So, where should he go to find it? D Zun? Is my master still cultivating? Little Qilin had a bad feeling in its heart, so it tried to ask in the best direction. Shun Julie did not speak. Kirin continued. Chapter 1558. Shun Julie did not say anything, so Kirin continued. D Zun, I don't think we should let her stay in one place to practice. She is so outgoing, and it will be very uncomfortable for her to stay in one place all the time. In fact, I'm also practicing. Why don't you bring me back? I can practice with her and relieve her boredom. Shun Julie clenched his fists in his sleeves. If only he knew where she was practicing. Since he could not find her here, Shun Julie did not want to waste any more time. He turned and left. Kieran knew that the D-Zune had always been indifferent and did not like to talk. However, since he came and specifically looked for it, there must be something he wanted to talk to it about. Why did he leave without saying a word after taking a glance at it? Kieran had always been with Ning Shuima, so it had always been brave. Once it was anxious, it would even dare to talk back to the only god in the world. It had been worried about Ning Shuima for 10 years. Now that there was finally someone who knew about it, how could it allow him to leave so easily? In a flash, it appeared in front of Shun Julie and said, D-Zune, please say something. Hey, father, is this mother's guardian beast? Before Shun Julie could say anything, a sharp horn of a red stone emerged from his sleeve. Kieran opened its mouth wide as if it was struck by lightning. Father? Mother? A stone? Its master was married to the great god? She gave birth? And she gave birth to a stone. These 3 nouns were simply 3 thunderbolts, shocking the little Qilin so much so that it couldn't come back to its senses for a while. I want to see it. The red stone jumped out of Shun Julie's sleeve and directly jumped on Kieran's head. Kieran was speechless. It was stunned. Shun Julie still did not say anything. He still spoiled his son very much. Since Niema wanted to see the Kieran, he would let him have a good look. Thus, with a wave of his sleeve, Little Apple's body shook, and it immediately returned to its original form, a majestic green Qilin beast. Little Stone bounced and rolled around on its body. Your scales are so slippery. The colors are beautiful, too. D-Zune. It's my master's. The little Qilin stood there stiffly and couldn't speak clearly. Master was clearly a human, so how could he give birth to a stone? Could it be that the ancestor's original body was a stone? It was really possible. The ancestor was so cold and stubborn that he was really like a rock. Kieran's mind was instantly distracted. The little rock was still bouncing around on its body, but it didn't dare to move. It was afraid that the little rock would fall to the ground and cause problems. After little Shurtu had enough of jumping on its body, he flashed again and jumped between its eyes. Kieran hurriedly raised its head and focused its eyes in the middle. It almost became cross-eyed. Darling, slow down a bit. Is your mother really Shuima? Yes. Little Stone then leaned on Kieran's face and looked at its eyes. Your eyes are so big. As it got closer, Kieran finally saw that there was something else in the little rock. There was a little baby lying there and staring at it. A stone fetus? Sun Wukong? When Kieran was with Ning Shuima, it heard her talk about the journey to the west, so it knew that Sun Wukong jumped out of stone. At that time, it only heard about it. It didn't expect to finally see a living one. There was actually a little baby in the stone. The little baby's facial features were very beautiful, and it looked very pink. This was its master's child. Chapter 1559. Although Kieran was puzzled, it was still very excited. It raised one of its claws and carefully removed the stone from its face. Let me see you. How did you get into the stone? Where is your mother? Mother has disappeared. My father and I are looking for her, but we can't find her. We can't find her. Shen Yinma felt wronged. He blinked his eyes and was about to cry. This little guy's every frown and smile was extremely infectious. When it pursed its lips, the little Qilin also felt sour in its heart. At the same time, it also felt that something was wrong. What do you mean by disappeared? She disappeared again? Was she taken away by Shui Ilan again? She disappeared for 10 years because of this. After all, Shun Yinma was still a baby. There were some things that he could not understand. He did not know why his mother disappeared and how she disappeared. Therefore, he only wanted to cry. I don't know. Mommy doesn't want me anymore. She doesn't want my father anymore. We have been looking for her. There was nothing in the world that Shun Julie could not find. After all, she had a child. She loved children so much. How could she leave the child and disappear for no reason? Kieran suddenly raised its head and looked at Shun Julie, who had been standing next to it silently. Great master, what is going on? My master? Shunjuli was slightly stunned. He had not heard the title Great Master for a long time. Now, he heard it from Kiran. He felt a stab of pain in his heart, but his tone was calm. Nyima, come here. Let's go back and look for your mother in other places. Okay. The little stone was about to jump out of Kiran's hand. Kiran quickly held it tightly, mainly because it was afraid that it would fall to the ground. How are you going to find your mother? Father said that we will look for her soul. Once we find her complete soul, she will be able to come back. Shinyenma told it what he knew. Kiran's body suddenly shook and its eyes widened. Her soul is gone? It suddenly raised its head and looked at Shanjuli. Dizun, her soul is gone? Yes. This time, Shanjuli finally replied with a word. Kiran felt as if he had been struck by a thunderbolt. After a long while, he said, Why? Did his soul scatter? Who hurt her? Me. Shanjuli's answer was always so concise and comprehensive. Kiran was instantly enraged. Blood rushed to his head. Why? Did she do anything wrong to you? I'm the one who let her down. Kiran's eyes reddened. She likes you so much. What right do you have to hurt her? In a fit of anger, he slapped out with his claws. A beam of blue light struck Shanjuli's chest. Shanjuli didn't dodge and let the blue light hit him. Kiran's martial arts had already reached a very high level. At the very least, he had reached Earth rank level 7. This time, it furiously struck out with its claws, which contained almost all of its power. Even if it hit a metal plate, it would still be able to create a large hole. However, after it hit the Dizun, his body did not move at all. It was as if he was not the one who was hit. He did not speak anymore. He just raised his sleeve, and the small stone in Kiran's hand automatically flew into his hand. Nyenma, let's go. He turned and left. Kiran was speechless. It angrily turned around 3 times in the same place. No, it wanted to go out. It also wanted to find its master's soul. Of course, it also wanted to know the truth. It was its master's family. It could not let her die without knowing the reason. Chapter 1560. Father, you are bleeding. Little Nyima jumped in Shanjuli's palm and tried to see him clearly. Shanjuli's lips were indeed bleeding, but he used a cleaning spell to remove the blood. However, his face looked paler. Why did the Kiran hurt you? Little Nyinma was angry. Just now, I wanted to bite the little Chilin in the stone, but before it could do anything, it was brought back by its father. It should have done something. Shinjuli only said 5 words. Kiran was Ning Shiwama's family. If her family wanted to beat him, he had no reason to fight back or avoid it. He did not even use his telekinesis to defend himself and took the hit. Although it was painful, what he needed now was a kind of pain. It was as if she would be able to come back after the pain was over. There was a surge of blood in his chest, but he forced himself not to show it on the surface. Little Nyenma tried his best to look at him in the stone. After a while, he suddenly cried, Father, I don't want anything to happen to you. Mommy is gone, and she doesn't want me anymore. Father, you can't lose your soul too. You can't lose me too. I don't want to be an orphan. Mother always said that orphans are very pitiful. He cried so loudly that it almost broke his skin. He was extremely smart. Obviously, he could see that his father was almost hurting himself. He did not seem to want to live anymore. The child's cries were heart-wrenching. If it could come out, it would probably cry by grabbing his collar. Shinjuli was shocked. He was indeed a little desperate now, and he was indeed tired of the world. That person was gone, and half of his life seemed to have been taken away. Every day and every night was a torture. Every moment was a heart-wrenching experience. But now he still had Nyenma. Nyenma had already lost his mother. He could not lose his father too. Shinjili raised his hand and patted Little Stone. No matter how upset he was, he did not want to affect the child. He smiled and said, Don't cry, Nyenma. Father is a god, and his soul will not disappear. Father will not abandon you. He will always be by your side. Nyenma is a man. A man will bleed, but not cry. Crying is the behavior of a bear. Stop crying. If you continue crying, you will drown the baby around you. Little Nyenma stopped crying and corrected his mother, Mother said that this is called amniotic fluid, not fetal fluid. And your mother is right. All right, don't cry. He held the stone and shook it gently. The little fellow felt as if it was in a cradle and finally fell asleep. Shun Julie was afraid that he would hurt his vital chi by crying, so he dripped another drop of divine blood into his body. Looking at his face, the little baby's facial features were exquisite. The corners of his lips and nose were a bit like his mother's, and his eyes were like his own. This temper, Shun Julie could not figure out who Nyinma took after. It was definitely not like him. Although he did not remember how he looked like when he was a child, he should have such a cold temper. He was the kind that did not care about anything. Unlike this little guy, who cried and laughed at times. He was also very talkative and lively. His tears and laughter could affect people's moods, making people want to treat him well. In this aspect, he should be like his mother. His mother was probably like this when she was a child. When she laughed, it was as if the sky was clear and the moon was bright. It made people want to hug her. When she cried, it made people feel gloomy, making them want to hug her even more. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.